Welcome to the Week in Sports Cars and the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires, supported by our dear friends at PNC Bank. Graham Goodwin, we have more questions than ever. I think we could do our own 6 hours of Silverstone stint length to answer all questions. We'll do our best in about the 2 hours that we have available. I will say that from those 75 plus questions, and we've just gotten a couple more, we might be up to 80 right now. Thank you so much, seriously. Thank you so much for sending them in. We're going to truly try and get through as many as we can. There are a couple of clunky and chunky ones that are going to take more time than others. Starting with our first question, which we'll get to in just a moment. We have questions coming in from last weekend's Rockin' Roughhouse GT special at VIR, our friends at IMSA putting on the Michelin GT Challenge. So there is a lot to get through here, my friend. We'll also mention up front that if you are a person who believes in a higher power, we are definitely extending our prayers for Robert Wickens and what we hope is a positive recovery from the injuries he sustained in the Pocono IndyCar race on Sunday. And if you are not a God-fearing man or woman, then please extend whatever kind thoughts or notes possible to him and the team. Graham Goodwin, dailysportscar.com, my soothsayer and man about town, man of knowledge when it comes to the FIA WEC and ELMS. We had a little race in Silverstone last weekend. Let's start with the primary question, one that even has an update this morning. What the hell happened with Toyota winning the race, losing the race via disqualification, appealing, and now this morning we learned they've rescinded their appeal. For those who I'm sure are wanting to know what the hell happened from start to finish, take us there, brother.
Before we get to that, and by the way, a firm yes to the point you've just made around Robert Wickens. You know what? The phrase thoughts and prayers has been massively devalued in recent years, but I think it's entirely appropriate at this juncture with Robert. Also wanted to flag up something else brought to us by a couple of listeners. Young Caleb Hammond. If you've not heard that name, C-A-L-E-B, Hammond, H-A-M-M-O-N-D. Young man suffering from leukemia. Doesn't look good for him. And he is putting out an appeal for racing stickers. Just look up that name somewhere on Google or any other search engine. There are contact details for him if you're out there as part of a team, if you've got a collection, you've got some spare stuff. Great thing to do. Just pop it in the post. Do what you can. Let's put smiles on faces that probably haven't had much to smile about lately.
Or shoot us a note on the Facebook page or Twitter, and I can send you his address. I'm actually staring at the envelope right here in front of me that we are going to send and fill it with all kinds of stickers. Caleb, whose prognosis is terminal, is a young racing fan who, and it's heartbreaking, but he has asked for racing stickers to be used to cover his casket. And so I'm just thinking of all the things you can do for a kid who has a finite amount of time left on this planet. Sending him some stickers might be one of the easiest things you can do that would qualify as a genuinely good deed. So if you need his address, if you aren't able to find it online elsewhere, just drop us a note on Facebook or Twitter and we'll get it to you right away.
And one final point before we get into the chaos that was Silverstone is to say thank you not only to our friends through Twitter and through Facebook, where it's been busier than ever, but also our friends on Reddit with the WC fans group there that have got involved too and have welcomed a call to arms for questions and some great stuff coming from them. They hit 20,000 followers this last week, so great to see them engaging with this. More power to you guys. It's great to see fans getting stuck in, and I'm sure that's going to give us further problems about how to keep to 2 hours in the future.
PNC is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Everyone tunes in on race day, but so much of the race is determined off camera during the work put in throughout the week, month, and year. From the gym to the practice track, Scott Dixon and the team take small steps every day to get closer to victory lane. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC.
Silverstone, where do we start?
What the hell happened with Toyota? Come on, man.
It started really with let's because it's going to cover a lot of the questions that have come in here, and we'll get to some of the names and the questions in a moment. First things first, high hopes that the change in equivalency technology would make a fundamental difference to the pace of the non-hybrid cars, and it did. Make no mistake about it. Jenson Button with qualifying lap actually set flying lap quicker than the Porsche 919 hybrids last year. Sadly, that wasn't good enough, and it certainly wasn't good enough when the rather predictable factor of traffic comes into play, because that's where the ace in the hole for the hybrid cars, this unbelievable ability to accelerate in kind of Millennium Falcon style through and away from traffic and punching out of corners, means that whatever you do with equivalency technology, you can't give them that kind of hyperdrive. So first things first, yes, the equivalence technology made a difference in terms of one lap pace. No, it didn't make the cars fundamentally closer over a race distance. I think it was 4 laps by the end of it. But then you're absolutely right, MP. Then we get into the wacky world of post-race tech for WEC. Very late that evening, once I'd actually come home from Silverstone, arriving here sometime before midnight, walked into a firestorm of stuff which saw both of the Toyotas finished first and second, excluded from the results, saying at that point that an appeal was going to be considered and looked likely. But since then, you're absolutely right. Having acknowledged what the issue was, we'll come to that in a minute, have both rescinded any thought that there will be an appeal, and indeed have issued a public apology to the drivers that the cars were not prepared in such a way that they could withstand the rigours of the Silverstone circuit. What went wrong? Well, all through the long weekend from both the ELMS and the Le Mans Series, Le Mans Series, dear me, there's a throwback, the WEC paddocks, we're being told that the most recent resurfacing of the track had caused real problems with micro bumps, basically, but also new curbing installed. And it would appear that, I think, well, a strategic problem from the team, and you have to say, possibly from the drivers too, looks like those cars were clattering those curbs massively. And that has caused an issue with the examination that happens about deflection of the underfloor plank, the underfloor device that is actually there to maintain the ground clearance that the cars must have. Both failed in not identical but very, very similar ways. And it raises all sorts of questions. One, it's not very nice, is it, that when you wake up the following morning after having a fabulous day at the races, you suddenly realise that what you thought you'd seen as results actually wasn't the result. Both the Toyotas, as I say, actually excluded from the results. That means, for the first time ever, an all-privateer, in fact, first privateer win in a WEC race for the number 3 Rebellion, an all-privateer podium, Rebellion, and SMP Racing. The first American winner of a WEC race in the manner of Gustavo Menezes. Of course, the best ever result overall in the WEC for Rebellion Racing. A whole host of weird and wonderful records that will come from that, but even more bizarrely, that the championship now only has 2 points between the, until Sunday, utterly dominant number 8 Toyota and the number 3 Rebellion, because of course those 25 points are wiped out. It's been a pretty solid year so far from the Rebellion squad, so we now have a position where just 2 points are in this fight ahead of the next round in a couple of months' time in Fuji, of course, Toyota's home race. Loads of questions about the ins and the outs of this, about strategy, about why didn't they notice this, about, isn't there a better way of actually doing post-race tech here? I can only really offer opinion on this one. It is massively frustrating. I share the frustrations of this hugely. It has happened a lot in recent months and recent years. Post-race in the LMS, we've had it in IMSA, of course, we've had it in the WEC. It is massively frustrating, but the reality is rules are rules. Yes, and as a couple of listeners have actually reflected, we can debate whether or not you change the system and impose a penalty for the following race. I happen to think that in the world of potential racing evils, coming into the next race, having allowed someone to get away with something is a pretty slippery slope.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's happened. You'll recall, Marshall, on at least a couple of famous occasions in the Rolex 24 Hours, where cars have finished substantially underweight, were then penalised for the next race. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd be particularly happy to walk away with a nice Rolex watch and a trophy and the prize fund, only to be maybe getting a 3-minute stop and go at Buttville nowhere.
Yeah, and I think the greatest point you've raised here, if you have been proven to have won a race, finished second or third, or honestly finished anywhere, in a vehicle that does not comply to the regulations, I believe that what has been done here, 100% correct. And this isn't a new standard, just saying that since you've thrown open the topic of how should you affect some sort of penalty for this, should it be a post-race fine? Should you keep your position but not the points? There's all manner of how to handle this. Some prize the show and not wanting to risk upsetting the fans, as you mentioned, who went home thinking that Toyota had won, only to wake up and find out that that wasn't the case, that things were being appealed, and a question mark could hang over who the winner was until this morning again with Toyota's withdrawal of that appeal. I completely agree in the, if you did not complete the race in a manner that complies to the rules, both technically in terms of the vehicle was out of specification, or a driver did something to warrant a change in the results, broke some sort of significant rule, I'm perfectly fine with the short storm of having to deal with, oh, by the way, so the guy you thought won didn't won, and here are the real winners, and it's never fun. It will continue happening as long as we have motor racing. I do vastly prefer this method than some of the other more comical things that we see in other championships. NASCAR is one that is often fond of not wanting to change the way the race ended, but taking something away so that the team that did win or had some sort of decent finish does not receive whatever incentive that came along with that. Another thing worth noting here, Graham, and I don't pretend to have a full understanding from a technical standpoint here, we know that the FIA WEC mentioned the car failing the deflection test on the rub strip, basically the piece that is bolted to the bottom of just about every race car with a low ride height, that is meant to protect the bottom of the car from wearing directly against the track. We know that this piece is said to have deflected beyond the accepted amount in post-race technical inspection. The cars, multiple, were therefore disqualified. You would have one likely scenario to cause that if cheating was not involved, and we're not saying cheating was involved at all. As Graham mentioned, the point about bumps and micro bumps and rough track surface and or curbing wearing on those planks, you could then have a very likely scenario where pick the thickness of the plank in each car, and that being worn down enough by the end of the race that when it came time to hang weights off of that portion of the car to see how much it deflected, the material had gone from being thick enough to withstand the deflection test and past that to being thin enough where it would start to bend and deflect too much. You might have the next question of, Well, if it's just a disposable plank, that truly, I mean, imagine just taping a couple pieces of wood, small pieces of wood to the bottom of your shoes and walking around and stomping and scraping them against the ground. Those are going to thin out rather quickly. You would then, if you wanted to have something fresh, you'd throw those away, start over again. That's the practice. Teams will go into the race with a fresh plank, wear that down, throw it away at the end of the race when they prepare for the next round, and have something brand new for the start of practice. These are disposable items. That being said, while they are disposable items, they serve the purpose exactly as intended, to rub against the ground so the carbon fiber floors do not. Well, there are ride height expectations. If we have a floor, especially where whichever portion, I'm assuming the leading edge of the plank has been worn down, if that is able to deflect.
It was the front portion.
Yeah.
It was the front portion.
That is where you can, in theory, start to generate a little bit more downforce than maybe any series would have in mind for you to be able to do. So to me, this is a bit of a weird thing, Graham, in that I get the rule. I'm not saying that the ACO/FIA did anything wrong in their decision. I'm just talking mindset-wise. If this were LMP2, I'd be all about, oh yeah, completely. They're asking the cars, these different manufacturers to comply to a spec set of rules. Everything is more or less locked down in terms of complying. When I'm looking at LMP1 hybrid, the one truly only kind of sort of wide open do what you want class, getting into this area, it just seems a little bit ill-fitting. Realize that it's the rules. So again, not saying they're wrong, but this isn't exactly trying to make the Toyotas so different than pick any other chassis in LMP1 non-hybrid that if we have deflection of the plank, which could then create a slight increase in downforce beneath the car, that really, to me, isn't something that the ACO and FIA have been trying to govern specifically with the Toyotas or in the hybrid class to level such a heavy penalty. So that, for me, is the only oddity here. If it were any other class, if it were LMP1 non-hybrid, LMP1L, I'd say, okay, makes sense. Here, it's kind of the one free toy in the series, but I guess they're not giving them any slack whatsoever.
They're not, and I think there's some good points made in some of the questions. We've got the likes of Adam Smith asking whether or not the penalty levied against Toyota puts a strain to simplify the rules. I think certainly we're at a stage now where the rules need to be taken. There needs to be kind of an informal review of those rules. Another question, and I'm searching to find it through this tidal wave of stuff they've sent our way. Thank you. Asking whether or not they need to communicate these things better. Yes, 100%, 1,000%, they do need to communicate this better. I'm going to give you an example of that, MP. Right as the cars came around to the start of the race, in the commentary booth, Alan McNish turned to me and said, "Oh, what's the fuel lap limit this race?" And I had to confess I didn't know. Ran around like a madman as the cars were on their formation lap trying to find out. The reality was it had been dropped and no one had told us. And that's completely ridiculous.
But I'm hoping you gave Alan a false number. Please tell me you gave him a false number that he read off during the broadcast. You had to take advantage of that. I can't tell you
how much fun it is winding up Alan McNish in that TV booth. And actually, that comes to another question that kind of came in, which I gather it was our comms that were going out with the majority velocity broadcast. It's our friend Ryan Terpstra. Was it my voice you heard in the velocity broadcast? I think it probably was. I have been part of the world feed for WEC for some time, part of the Radio Le Mans broadcast prior to that, so more or less from the start of the FIA WEC, and this year it's alongside Martin Haven and some bloke called McNish, Shaw's fella. I think he's Welsh, strange accent. But no, you didn't hear either Dario or Marino Franchitti in the booth. It was we three and Louise Beckett on the pit lane. But yes, there needs to be a lot more work done to explain this. This is a fiercely complex process. I don't underestimate the difficulties of it. I think they have made a genuine effort to reset the clock on this one. But the reality is, I think we're dealing with an element of the performance of the two hybrid cars that you just cannot match in terms of power. We're also at the stage where for the non-hybrid cars, we're more or less at the point where I wouldn't say they're quite running unrestricted, but they are likely running very close to the point where they can have confidence over realistic levels of longevity for the cars over a 6-hour race. So the only thing you can then do is to reel in the hybrids. And I'm here to tell you that I think that's very unlikely to happen. Certainly, absolutely unlikely to happen until we've got the Fuji race behind us.
I'm going to make an absolute groundbreaking announcement here. First time ever on the Week in Sports Cars podcast, Graham. I'm going to make an open call for a sponsor search. If you are a company based in the UK who sells lubricants and or squeakless office chairs, please contact us, because we are going to get Graham Goodwin into a comfy seat that, despite however much WD-40 you apply, it keeps fighting back. It's like the Toyota planks refuses to comply with the rules. We're going to get Graham Goodwin into a comfy and squeakless seat before the end of the year. So whether you are a company that sells spray lubricants and wants to prove the quality of the product, or if you're just a fan of chairs that are super awesome for being a professional journalist and want to make sure that Graham is able to do his job without squeaks, reach out to us here at the Marshall Pruett Podcast, our Week in Sports Cars episode, and darn it, Graham Goodwin, we are going to exercise the power of the internet and get you sorted, my man. All silliness and sarcasm aside, we had some other fun things, too, to get into before we dive into more WEC, more ELMS, which has been the vast majority of the topics coming in. We also had some great Cadillac DPI announcements in recent weeks. So we touched on the JDC Miller Motorsports move with 2 Cadillacs coming their way for next year. We also had Juncos Racing, IndyCar team aligned with Chevrolet, announced that they will be joining the Cadillac family as well, Graham. As many as 7 Cadillacs. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say as many. We still have a couple months to go before we get to the Rolex 24. There could be more, but we are facing a modern Porsche 962 type solution, my friend, where one manufacturer has changed course from saying, nope, these are ours, can't have them, to, hey, if you are a good team and or show us what we think is going to be of value to have you part of the family, you get a Cadillac DPI, and you get a Cadillac DPI. Different
Well,
outcome.
I could give you an update as well, because almost the last person I bumped into in the paddock before going to the booth for the WEC race was one of my good friends from Dallara, and I did ask them where we were with a couple of things, and there's a couple of little bits and pieces that I have not yet put up onto Daily Sports Car, but will likely be there by the time this goes live, both of which have an involvement with Dallara chassis. First thing to say is I did ask them how many cars they are building, how many chassis they are building, new chassis they're building, in time for the coming season, so 2019 season. The answer to that, by the way, is 5, 3 confirmed customers, and you would expect there to be other spares put into the pot as part of that, but certainly no confirmation that that we're going to see any additional cars over and above the ones that we've now got announced. The second thing on the Dallara front, and actually it's something that was developing through the week. We were there for most of the week at Silverstone. And yes, we've had this this kind of exchange with United Autosports around the potential for them to be coming forward, not in 2019, but in 2020 with the DPI program.
Great piece of news, great piece of work you and the DSC team put together over the weekend on that.
That's interesting. We're sort of being guided towards that on the basis of the commercial package coming together. Now, that didn't quite ring true with me, bearing in mind the potential difficulties rather, that you might get with Extreme Speed Motorsport, the Nissan Ligier package. United Autosports, of course, parent company is a Ligier importer. They're very much partners with Ligier. And cut a long story short, other sources in the industry have more or less confirmed that what we've got is a pretty live examination and assessment of the prospects for a Ligier McLaren package for 2020. And my view would be at this stage that the Nissan package is a neat and handy fallback for United Autosports if that doesn't come into play. So good news again for the DPI side of things. Bad news, by the way, for the P2 side, because that came in concert with confirmation from Richard Dean at United Autosports of something we've known for a little while, which is that the NAEC, the North American Endurance Championship Ligier from United Autosports that sits at the moment with Andretti Autosports to campaign on behalf of United, will not be at Petit Le Mans and will not race next season in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, because that doesn't fit their business model with the more pro-amness, if you like, the lack of ability to compete for the overall wins. However, my friend, good news came a knocking on the back of that story, in that there are a number, and that number that I'm chasing at the moment is 6 teams that have told me that the business model for P2 in IMSA, and in particular for some of the blue ribbon events, does fit with where they're at. Now, at this stage, I think you could certainly see a handful of LMP2 cars from both the European Le Mans Series and likely the FIA WEC as well, certainly competing at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, and potentially at Sebring too, because of course, whilst there is a clash with the WEC, there is not a clash with the European Le Mans Series. So I think what it has done, certainly for some of the blue ribbon events, is given these teams an opportunity. I would suggest a reasonably healthy potential cabal, and it will not just be Oreca's if it happens. There are at least 2 Dallara teams who are interested and very actively interested. So potential for, let's say, somewhere between 2 and half a dozen LMP2 teams from this side of the pond to come and have a bit of a crack at the opening race of the season, and maybe some of them to stay over for Sebring too, because there is, of course, a gap in their schedule that wasn't previously there. We are not going to have a WEC prologue at Paul Ricard or anywhere else this season because of the recasting of the calendar. So the need to actually have your car in Europe for the end of March has disappeared. So the opportunity to actually do something in mid-March at Sebring all of a sudden is a new one for some of those European teams. So across the piece, and I know you've got other DPI news, MP, around the excellent piece of work that you did with the Ford story. Across the piece, LMP2, whether wittingly or not, has unlocked a little bit of a new marketplace for one-off entries. DPI, certainly what looks like developing good news for 2020. And following up on another story that was doing the rounds, I know there was something kicking around about the potential for yet another Cadillac, this time potentially a customer car for Jackie Chan DC Racing. I think that's a possible rather than a probable. I think that is a lot more to do with the team putting it out there that they are available and willing to come, but more particularly making it clear that they won't do that with an LMP2 car. So they have opportunities to do that if the commercial things come together, but I would certainly not put that in a probable. I would put that in a possible category, and if so, that would certainly only be for a couple of races at the start of the year.
Didn't someone tell me they read something about Cadillac only being able or willing to support 5 DPIs, Graham, somewhere?
It's been all over the place.
I guess my math is failing me because it seems like there's going to be 7 at least next year.
The other quick thing, by the way, coming out from most unlikely of sources today, is confirmation that the Visit Florida racing, I keep saying that, it's Spirit of Daytona, still on track to see that car again for Petit Le Mans. Let's wait and see whether or not they manage to get the lovely blue number 90 car out to play. That would be good to see.
Yeah, I sent a driver who's keen on branching out into IMSA's prototype class in their direction, and hopefully he and some of the sponsors that support his motor racing efforts do come to terms, because absolutely welcome seeing that team and that car back. Some good folks putting that number 90 entry on track. David Harvey says the AER, Advanced Engine Research Engine, seems to be a perennial feature of sports cars, yet never, quote, seems to have been successful. Is that a fair assessment? And is Genetic going in the wrong direction using it? Question mark. David, I'd say this. If I'm thinking in most modern terms, not necessarily back in the 2000s and such, but more modern terms, consistency is the one thing where I would say if I was hoping for an ingredient that would turn fortunes around for AER to become a routine race winner, that might be the one ingredient which I'd say on the European side, I have not seen as much of that as I would hope, meaning in the same car, at every round, year after year after year, couple years in a row, 2 at minimum. That's where you start to find whatever issues might be in place, fix whichever things are needed from a reliability standpoint. When you don't have that, or if you're working honestly with a team or teams that aren't necessarily of the highest level of competitiveness, it's hard. I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, but it is hard for a smaller boutique supplier to then have top-tier success. So that stands out to me, and I realize it's a very general answer. Here in the U.S., we've had AER supplying Mazda's 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine in the back of the RT24P. I'd say that with the motor that went into the car starting in 2017, which had routine problems, this season so far, Graham, hasn't been the big headline in terms of...
No, it's not been the issue, really, is it?
Let down, this broke, fiery problem. Last year, you'd be telling yourself silly stories if you did not point to the AER engine being one of the most routine problem areas with the car. This year, it seems like they've gotten to a pretty happy place. Haven't won yet, but we've seen them become successful, running strong. BOP hasn't always been in their favor, but at least now for me, Graham, when I go into an IMSA race where the prototypes are featured, I'm factoring the Mazdas in and not thinking about them coming up short or sitting parked on the side of the road with a driveline issue.
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, a couple of plus points for the AER. Number one, they've just, as a result of those Toyota disqualifications, got their first ever overall WEC podium in the SMP racing car. As a couple of our listeners have pointed out, that lap from Jenson Button bettering the pace of the all-conquering 919 hybrid last year. Yes, there's some other factors to take into account, but in terms of that unreliability there's a couple of factors to mention here too. One is we have seen EOT changes throughout this season. Not the easiest thing when you've done all your testing, I would presume, in one particular spec, to then have to make adjustments, changes. A change in boost pressure is going to have an effect on a manner of other things through that package. Reality was that the car with Jenson Button at the wheel at Le Mans actually lasted 23 hours. and I don't think had a mechanical problem for the early part of the race. It certainly didn't have the pace it required, but it didn't have a mechanical problem. This time, unfortunately, it was all over very, very quickly for the number 11 car, and we didn't get to see Jensen race in his home race. That's a source of real disappointment for what frankly was an exceptional crowd. That's a point as well worth making. It speaks to one of the other questions that comes a little later, but they're trying hard. From all accounts, there was no real issues with the engine. It's a completely different package than the old P60, now dubbed the P60B. So the general architecture is pretty similar, but the details of that engine are fundamentally different. They put a lot of attention into that longevity and into reliability. It's taking time, as is everything with, it has to be said, what was a very last minute coming together non-hybrid class. They are going to start to run out of excuses if this continues. This is not just, by the way, aimed at AER, but across the board in non-hybrid. But the reality is we are dealing with a completely extraordinary situation. Frankly, what was an exceptional response from the teams in the industry that exceeded, I think, just about everybody's expectations in terms of numbers. And boy, are we having some teething troubles. So I'm not yet at the point where I'm kind of panicking about the sustainability of this. We do, though, get to the stage here where I do think those powers that be that we talk about all the time do need to think about just where we're heading for the remainder of this season. And let's not forget next season too, because as things stand in terms of the pure performance on track, MP, if we don't have Toyota handing themselves another brickbat, the reality is who is going to stop Toyota from winning this season, which of course includes Le Mans 2019, and next season, which includes Le Mans 2020. There are no cavalry coming in the hybrid class, certainly before we get to the new rules, which is the 2020-2021 season. It might be 2020 rules, but that means the 2021 Le Mans 24 Hours. A solid look, I think, needs to be taken. Just exactly what headlines they want to be looking for beyond, isn't Fernando wonderful? Yes, he is. He's an exceptional racing driver. And lest we forget, by the way, those cars were racing, and actually the manner of their disqualification proves it. Excellent point in, by the way, in answer to one of the questions posted on Twitter from none other than Nicky Katzberg, who had a grandstand seat from the seat of his BMW, watching these guys fly by like TIE fighters in a Star Wars sequel throughout the race. They were racing hard for the vast majority of that race. That's very much a plus, and Toto to be applauded for that. Will that carry on in the wake of this? Well, there's a question.
Our friend Andrew Baca has a great question, which is also one served up for you. It says, Jensen Button made comments over the weekend that their car is running P1 tires designed for an all-wheel drive hybrid, which made for an imbalance in grip and heat, the non-hybrid being rear-wheel drive only. Any idea if all the privateers are running similar tires, or if others have made alternate tire choices?
Well, the answer is I'm sure they are running similar tyres. It's not a dramatically different scenario than we saw a couple of 3 years ago in GTE Pro, when Porsche, who were really suffering at that time with what was becoming a rapidly outdated package, funded to a serious six-figure level testing and development of Michelin tyres for GTE. Now, what that meant was that the offer then became rather skewed to their rear engine, and for that matter, mid-engine packages for Ferrari, which meant that, for instance, Aston Martin was hung out to dry. They all of a sudden found themselves with Michelin tyres that had been effectively development paid for by a competitor, that all of a sudden was not suiting their package. That, in no small part, was why they moved to Dunlop, which, by the way, served them up a WEC championship. That arrangement, by the way, shifted back to Michelin, not because Dunlop fell short in terms of their competition package, but because a commercial deal was done with Michelin that included supplying tyres to Aston Martin Lagonda's road cars. So it was one of those deals where there was, I would presume, favourable commercial terms. Michelin became standard equipment on road cars, and as part of that became a partner in the race team. So the answer there is yes, I'm sure that is the case, but that's because, again, you kind of come crashing into the reality of how do you keep the budgets down for a team running two LMP1 cars, massively expensive pieces of equipment. Have they got the required financial clout to get Michelin to go out and develop tyres specifically for them? My guess is they don't. They don't have that level of comfort zone. Whether or not all of them could club together and arrange that would be a very interesting question. In LMP, you don't have the restrictions you do in LMP2, for instance, where you start with the tyres that are declared at the beginning of the season, and that's what you've got for the remainder of the season. LMP1, it's a lot more open. So if S&P Racing or if Rebellion or if any combination of the both of them plus the remaining cars in the class wished to go and knock on the door of Michelin or for that matter Dunlop and see whether or not something could be done, the answer is it probably could be. The fact that they're not prepared to go back to previous generations of tyres, I think speaks again to the fact that the development of the rubber side of racing here just is continuing on at a pace. That's why, in no small part, we continue to see track records, lap records broken as these fantastic companies with their amazing technology push forward. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in IMSA next year when Michelin become the standard tyre supplier in the prototype class.
And here's a little bit of technical fun for those who might be wondering what Mr. Jensen Button is talking about here. If we think back to, or if you happen to have followed in the American Le Mans Series in 2009, and also in, I guess, the forerunner of the WEC with the Audis and such that said, hey, we're going to use same width tires front and rear. Essentially, we're going to find a way to fit the wide rear tires up front. That was a wonderful innovation, but there was also a comment right away that initially there were balance problems, in particular with the Acura ARX, good Lord, I always forget, 02A, whatever number it was.
I think it was 02A, didn't the first time, yes.
The big issues were, at the time, they were essentially given rear tires to bolt onto the front, and the car was not all-wheel drive. And what they found was the rear tires, which were designed and constructed in a manner to deal with a serious amount of torque being put down, simply did not match what the front of the car needed, the amount of force being put through the front tires. And so, and actually I'm not sure if that was ever fully rectified, but that was a major handling complaint throughout that car's very brief lifespan, Graham, that, hey, simply taking rear tires and adding them up front, while it's great because we have more rubber and more contact patch, the actual construction was not something that was bespoke to the needs of the front of the car. That was not being driven by either electric motors or mechanical means to create all-wheel drive. We have a similar situation here with front tires being taken off of an all-wheel drive prototype, and those front tires being applied to non-all-wheel drive prototype. You have a case where you're not driving that torque through the front tires as you would with the rear, and therefore my guess is they are a little bit harder, a little bit tougher to generate heat with, and therefore might not offer the same exact grip that they were hoping to have. So it's not the first time this has been experienced, no, but definitely something that, admittedly, every team with whichever tire supplier they have would love to have that vendor say, and what kind of tires would you like, and what can we make to make you happy? Doesn't always happen in a kind of spec-ish supply scenario.
It's interesting, isn't it? It is one of those ones where it seems to be a simple solution. And, I think from Jensen's point of view, he was pointing it out. Yes, I have a bit of a moan about it, but it's an explainer rather than a moan. This is one of the reasons why we've got a problem here. Of course, what he's trying to do, he's trying to persuade the team, he's trying to kind of leverage the team to respond to that feedback. But this is not something you can do overnight, and it's not cheap. To give you an idea of the kind of money I believe we were talking about, now this would have been 3 years ago with Porsche, I think that the amount that I was being told was between 400 and 600,000 euros in terms of the testing and development time that was required to produce that improved tyre.
Yikes. Well, sounds like a GoFundMe problem we can solve. Let's just go online. We're going to crowdsource the tires we want. Let's. What can we do here to blast through a couple, brother? Well,
I'll tell you what, a couple of quick bits. Dennis Perukniak, I think it is. What happened to Judd and their V10 P1 engine talked about during the winter? Nobody bought it, Dennis, I think is what it came down to. They were fairly late to the party. I know a couple of teams looked at it, but it was a little bit too late. Interesting one here from Daniel Harvey Dyer. How quick would a Toyota TS050 go with the hybrid unplugged, fuel flow turned up to non-hybrid level? Does anyone know? Reality is that is something like a 500 horsepower engine with an aerodynamic package that is optimized for hybrid use. What does that mean? It means that it's very efficient when you lift and coast. So I think the answer is it might well get schooled by some of the current non-hybrids, which let's not forget here, much as they're struggling in the wake of the Toyotas, are incredibly rapid machines. But I think the answer is it would be schooled by them. Big changes happened in the last couple of years with the hybrids. Some of you recall that on occasion we've had, hybrid problems or failures, and some of the cars, I think one of the Audi iterations in particular, could run with the hybrid actually disconnected. The current Toyota, I'm pretty certain, cannot do that. So to re-engineer that car to effectively be a non-hybrid car would be a massive undertaking, and I would suggest it might even be simpler to start from scratch.
Let's see, where shall I pick from? Let's...
Well, it's one for Jonathan Wesley, actually, while you're having a quick look. You have a quick look through that one, because it's another one that, happily, I know the answer to. Jonathan got a chance to speak to Brendan Hartley during the 2014 British Grand Prix meeting after his first WEC races with Porsche and LMP1. And comes down to this question, which is what difference can a driver make in those cars? We've heard it before. This kind of multitasking aptitude that is required now to squeeze the best out of those packages. Less pure racing, those kind of things have been mentioned by a number of drivers, not least Alan McNish and particularly Tom Christensen when they stepped away. What kind of difference can it make? Most recent example of that came during the prologue this year at Paul Ricard, where when the absence of Fernando Alonso and one or two others, I don't think Seb Buemi was there either, amongst the others that were fielded was Alex Wurz, had not been aboard one of the Toyota hybrids in anger for about a year and a half. Alex found himself mentally overwhelmed by the experience and talked to me afterwards and said, look, you need to look at it this way. The systems have now advanced to the point where it's a bit like those kind of automatic modes you can have in a road car. It will get through the task. It will do it pretty efficiently. But compared to a situation where the driver is allowed the inputs that they're allowed to do into that car, you'll lose 1.5 to 2 seconds a lap. Now, what kind of inputs? You are talking, he says, somewhere between 2 to 4 major inputs into the systems every couple of corners on every lap. So that means you're looking at the way in which the power is delivered, the brake balance, all of those kind of things, and you're doing it rapidly in traffic, in the dark, and in the wet. That's how you get the very best lap times out of this. To my mind, our friend Fernando Alonso has taken an awful lot of flack in the last few months over the impact, positive and negative, that he's made in sports car racing. I don't think we've seen MP any driver adapt as quickly to that kind of level of challenge in an LMP1 hybrid since this formula began. I think his response to it, his pace in the car, his ability to kind of to adapt to that challenge, a very different challenge than we've seen before, certainly in sports car racing. Yes, he's got his F1 most recent F1 experience to fall back to, but a fairly extraordinary transition and affected extremely well. Couple that to the fact that he delivered in the IndyCar as well, and if you ever had any doubt just how what an extraordinary talent the Spaniard is, then put it to one side, because I'm here to tell you that is one very special race driver.
I would say, and I don't know if you're going to agree with this, Graham, but I would say that if Alonso can keep demonstrating this kind of potential in the WEC, I bet you he's going to get a call from a Formula One team. So there's certainly merit.
Red Bull.
Well, no, you got to start humble, right? You're looking at a Sauber or something. Start low, but there's something there. I'm not sure how far the guy can go, but there's something there. All right, I am going to take a couple here on IMSA because we need to give IMSA some love, and I'm also going to take one here coming from our friends at Reddit. And once I'm done with, once we're done with that one at Reddit, we're going to take a quick little break here for our friends at PNC Bank. All right, Dan Coughlin says, just me. Or does it feel like IMSA has swallowed the whistle of late? I'm not for micromanagement of incidents, but swerving on the back straight at VIR shouldn't be allowed at any time. Dan, I can't disagree. I also am not super mad. I think Bo Barfield, IMSA's race director, could be more proactive with the officiating whistle. I also realize that there is a bit of give and take stylistically, and I appreciate the way Bo goes about his business insofar that, unlike some race directors, and I'm not saying that with anyone specifically in mind, just there are counter examples to Bo, there are some who have the whistle in their mouth the entire game, and they're looking for any little thing to call. And I don't know if that always creates the best game, the best race for those of us not only wanting to see competition, but also to be entertained by it. And so Bo's general approach is, if it's really egregious, if it looks like it's hard to measure intent, but if you can tell that driver A intentionally did something to driver B, a jerk of the steering wheel to block or to hit or to bump or whatever, you're going to get some kind of action most of the time from race control. But by and large, the little ticky-tack things, the things that, as you might have learned since we started this podcast, this Week in Sports Cars podcast, the first week of February, I'm not a big fan of the little ticky-tack things at all. Hey, the refueler's right glove was pulled down a quarter of an inch and you could see 3 hairs on the wrinkle in his wrist. Therefore, that person was not perfectly covered in event of a fire, and you must do a stop plus $5 million or whatever. I appreciate Bo's approach to race officiating, and often when questions come up in other series, is this race director doing things the right way or the wrong way? I use Bo as a fairly common standard of reference that do it if you have to, if it's truly warranted. If the average person would look at the scenario and go, yeah, that wasn't right, that's when I've tended to see Bo act. And if there's some things where you go, yeah, technically maybe you could, but is that going to ruin the quality of the race? You often don't get something called. Let me move on to Donald Ducky Howe. He says, after reading a rather silly tweet from a team owner in the IMSA paddock calling the WEC the joke of endurance racing, and he says couldn't be more wrong, why are there people in the IMSA paddock with such ill will towards the WEC? Love the show! Thanks, Donald. Love you for sending in the question. I think the easy answer is we've gone from a place, Graham, in 2014 when the unified American Le Mans Series and Grand Am paddocks came together under the IMSA banner, working with the ACO/FIA WEC folks to use both the GTE Pro category specifications for what we call GT Le Mans over here, plus LMP2, and what has since evolved from there. We've gone from a place in North America where the WEC/French sanctioning bodies are viewed as friends and allies to a couple of instances now where there's a feeling of bait and switch. And I know that a lot of that is more, Donald, based on regulatory differences and changes than actual WEC racing, and there being animus towards WEC competition. But I also think that there might not be a huge distinction that's happening there. I think it might be more of a blanket, we don't like the way they keep jerking us around type mindset, and then that spills over a bit to calling out the WC the joke of endurance racing. So this is just one team owner being referenced, of course, not necessarily a team owner who's speaking for all the paddock, any of the paddock other than himself. I do know that in a very general sense, though, you have more people looking within the paddock to IMSA as being the guiding light on all things happening today and in the future than looking to the ACO and FIA as being half of the decision-making matrix on what will become whatever our future is. And that, Graham, blends perfectly into the next question from Brian Cohn.
That does say, why does US sports car racing place itself at the knee of the ACO FIA? Over time, consistently been a poor to bad player, won't call them anything resembling a team player, even on the same team. They never act with American interests in mind. And it goes on, as you might well imagine, talks about Le Mans becoming all-powerful. I'll answer actually both these questions. I do know exactly which team owner, by the way, that Donald was talking about, and it is actually a team owner that was, until relatively recently, active in the WEC. I hear his point. I see the underlying point. I think the language is unfortunate, and frankly, I think the language is wrong. As for Brian's point, well, look, there is a reality that without a decision that the WEC FI made, you wouldn't have DPI. The reason that DPI is possible in its current form is because there's a cost-capped LMP2. So please, let's get away from the everything has to be them and us and they're all against us and it's all terrible. Neither would you have GTLM in its current form, because that is an FI sanctioned, ACO sanctioned GTE Pro formula. Yes, there are some issues here, and those issues are not minor in terms of any prospect whatsoever in the short to medium term of a unified top class. Do I think either sanctioning body has particularly covered themselves in glory? No. Actually, I think in this instance, I think we've got to a point again, not for the first time, where unenlightened self-interest has come into play on both sides of this coin. Whether or not one or the other is more successful in that doesn't mean to say that they weren't actually ploughing, a relatively single-minded furrow, or at the very least, making sure that their options were protected in going forward with a unified conversation. So I'm not a buyer of this sanctioning body is awful and that one's absolutely brilliant on any kind of front. I would say, Brian, on this one particularly, look at DPI. I would absolutely agree that at the moment that is looking like it was firmly the correct choice for IMSA, for North America. But the reality is that was facilitated by a series of decisions, some of which I didn't agree with, I have to tell you, by the rule makers at the ACO. And for that, they need the recognition that what it's given you in the United States is the opportunity for exactly the kind of if not cost cap, the more cost efficient formula for a top class in prototype racing that has now become as popular as it is, both with the teams. I'm not going to say the manufacturers quite yet. I think that has to be proved with the teams and the fan base, who seem to love what they're getting to see at the moment.
Add a couple points here, Graham, and don't disagree with any of that. I think we could be headed, piggybacking off of a question last week about Jim France taking over NASCAR on an interim basis, with Brian France's personal problems being tended to away from the CEO position. I think we could be in a place in the not-too-distant future where IMSA is reaching out to the world's prototype constructors and commissioning, or I shouldn't say commissioning, aligning themselves directly with Anna Reka, a Ligier, a Dallara, Riley Multimatic, pick whomever. Whereas the DPI formula, as you rightly mentioned, is a ACO, WEC, FIA construct, LMP2 with an American twist. I will be very curious to see if IMSA, going forward with this next set of regulations, knowing that the current state of relationship with our friends in France on the topic of a unified top-tier prototype formula continue to head in opposite directions. Be interesting to see if IMSA goes straight to those manufacturers and says, hey, we've worked together in this by way of Paris and Le Mans type relationship starting in 2017. Why don't we just eliminate that route and let's go direct, and you all are ones that we are nominating as official suppliers for IMSA's DPI class, not the DPI class which is a version of what is an underlying WEC construct. So that'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Absolutely right. And by the way, there's another story doing the rounds in the background, not one I've yet had a chance to discuss with you, MP, which indicates some interesting moves on that front, which indicate to me as well that whilst do I think in its current form we've got hope and a prayer of hypercar being a global formula? No, I think that's more or less gone. But I do think there are elements on both sides which are trying to keep a door open to the potential for a wider cabal of cars being admissible, if you like, globally. There are some moves in the background at the moment which may or may not be around the prospects for what happens next with DPI version 2, for instance, that could have some interesting repercussions on a rather wider scale. One to think about as we kind of move forward. I don't think there are very many people that want to play master and servant. Those that might be are frankly doing it wrong. I think there might be rather more that aren't trying terribly hard to bridge some of the gaps that are in there. And I think there are some of those on both sides of this debate.
I just had Depeche Mode come to mind when you said master and servant. Two other quick little facets to add to this as well, and it's just understanding the multiple linkages between IMSA and the ACO/FIA. We have the licensing, as I alluded to just a moment ago, the licensing of GTE Pro, of those specifications and rules for use here in America. So that is something that I don't foresee that changing. We also have a case where IMSA pays, I don't know the amount, but IMSA pays for the awarding of the entries to certain champions in its WeatherTech Championship to be able to compete at Le Mans. So there is business going on, ongoing business, that opens the door for IMSA entrants, champion entrants, to gain access to Le Mans through automatic entries. There's also payment in the opting in for GTE/GTLM usage of that class structure. So it's just worth bearing that in mind when we have things clearly misfiring on the prototype front. That's great. I do believe IMSA and Jim France will say, hey, cool, great, we got our own thing, we're going to do it, and we might just connect directly with the manufacturers to have them supply us with whatever we're going to do with our 2022 prototype regulations. But shutting the door or inviting the ACO and FI to step out the door and then closing it behind him, I can't see how that happens altogether at any point in time in the future, because there are the other business considerations in mind. Let's jump over, Graham, to this awesome question coming in from Reddit, and then we will get to our friends at PNC Bank. This one is it's on the topic of safety. It's less of a question, more of a comment, but we appreciate these. This comes in from Cookie Monster FL. I'd love to know what the FL stands for. I can come up with a few ideas on what that might be. Cookie Monster says, we've had multiple massive shunts at Radillon. This is referring to the Spa-Francorchamps No, I'm always making up new words. Trank, that's this episode's. This year at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, and they haven't all been caught on camera. The 24-hour crash in particular was not only not recorded, except for some poor quality, incomplete spectator footage, but also seemed to be swept under the rug by the broadcasters. I know this is a well-trodden ground for you guys. I know that Graham has strong and well-justified opinions on internet speculation. I did read about those opinions, Graham, on the internet. And I know that this might all seem a bit conspiratorial, but I will raise the question anyways. Is Spa guilty of diverting attention away from one of its most iconic corners to avoid adding weight to the growing pile of evidence for this legendary section of the track being unsafe? And that opens up a number of things, Graham. You obviously, on top of the 24-hour, good Lord, bomb explosions, we would almost have to call them, if you look at the wreckage that was caused by the crash, and then the further destruction done trying to get drivers out of the vehicle. Wow. So great question. Great question. Give us your thoughts to start on this. Or is there an active conspiratorial sweeping going on?
No, I think the first thing to say is generally speaking, that in terms of a TV broadcast, if you have an accident of that magnitude, it would be inappropriate to show the immediate recovery operation. Don't forget as well, it was dark at the time that this actually happened, so the quality of some of those images will not be of the best. Generally speaking, the way it would normally be done by a race organizer and their host broadcaster is to ensure that what you've got is accurate information on the condition of the drivers before you release either a bulletin and or significant footage. Have I seen any other footage? I've seen some other footage of the lead up to that accident. I'll share this with you, okay? I have been pretty actively involved in a follow-up to that incident. And by the way, congratulations to Andy Merrick, who was one of the victims of the accident, got married at the weekend, and pleased to say that sufficiently recovered from his injuries to walk up the aisle unfettered. Delighted to see that. And Andy and the new Mrs. Merrick, many, many happy wishes to you.
Prayers to her, by the way. Prayers to her. Good Lord.
Absolutely.
Bad decision, but congratulations.
But that accident was horrendous, and there were indeed some factors that require explanation and investigation behind that accident. It would not be appropriate for me on this occasion to share that with this audience. I will tell you that I have shared what I know and what I've been told by people who were on site and involved. I've shared their thoughts and their concerns about one or two matters that contributed to the seriousness of that accident with the appropriate authorities. We are going to be visiting there with championships, which I'm involved with later this season, and I would not hide behind the veil of chucking it up for a bit of clickbait at the expense of a proper investigation. That has been done. I have picked up the phone to a couple of people who needed to know what I've been told, and I know that they have responded in the way that I would have hoped that they did, that they would rather. I should say as well, by the way, I'm going to take a moment right now to think about the response that was made in those circumstances by the men and women in orange and black at the top of Radeon in those circumstances, effectively a flying bomb coming towards them, a flame, which is what the Bentley was at that point. That car went over the top of the Lamborghini and through part of it. We are very lucky that the impact was not driver's side on either of them. I also think that it would be a good idea moving forward in the area where we've got the activities of, amongst others, the Sean Edwards Foundation, that any accident investigation of this sort is published. We have it in the area of maritime safety. We have it in the area of aeronautic safety. And we darn well should have it in the area of race car safety. Because if lessons can be learned by one sanctioning body, they should be learned by all of them. So it's about time we did get rid of this veil of secrecy after the event with these sometimes horrific incidents. I don't actually believe in this instance, by the way, that either driver was at fault here. There was a prior incident, the immediate circumstances that caused Andy to arrive on the scene at barely fettered speed, I believe, from what I've actually been told, were not of his making. The circumstances behind that need to be investigated and need to be dealt with. And also, I think it's about time we got to be a little less precious as organising bodies and as the guys responsible for safety here about putting that out into a controlled manner in the public domain. It's an accident report. People were hurt. It could have been an awful lot worse. Others around the world, and particularly in emerging markets, might well want to learn the lessons from that. Time for the FIA to act. End of story.
Couple of points to add here, Graham. And again, I really do appreciate this question because it's one that has many facets to it. I know for a fact that at least privately, a number of major motor racing sanctioning bodies share information exactly like you mentioned: crash investigation, safety, device exploration, R&D. These things I do know get shared behind the scenes privately. An email from sanctioning body A to sanctioning body B saying, by the way, we learned this thing, might be of interest to you. Somewhat open channels. What I am unaware of is a more formal layer or level, the proverbial drop box, where all sanctioning bodies, major sanctioning bodies, send in whatever they have that can all be used and seen among one another. Right now, to my knowledge, it is more an informal thing. It's frankly built on relationships. The person in charge of this series knows someone in charge of the person in charge of another series, and they've agreed to share whatever findings might be going on. This, for example, and this is stepping out of sports cars a little bit, but just a known example, Formula One has its halo. This is something that IndyCar has chosen to not use. They're developing their windscreen, built from a thick fighter jet type polycarbonate, not glass, but thick plastic, ballistic type plastic. And this is something that between the FI Technical Working Group and IndyCar's competition department, they routinely send information back and forth. Hey, we just sent this through this kind of test, and or hey, this crash just happened in F1, and this is what we found. IndyCar is developing theirs for introduction next year. Formula One has theirs in place this year. I like to see that there is this collegial mindset of, even if we have different products trying to achieve the same thing, how can we just build one another's knowledge base to benefit our respective series for the greater good? I don't know if that happens so much, Graham, on the major crash topic, though. And I would say that there's a couple things in there for us to keep in mind. If we're talking about a major series, a Formula One, an IndyCar, a NASCAR, WEC, IMSA, there are enough staff members in place, and there are likely protocols in place for a full investigation to be done. Not just, hey, this person had a big crash, but we want to see the car. We're going to impound it. We're going to do something. Take photos of it, look for detailed information, come up with something to explain how this big catastrophic thing, why it took place, how it happened, what was impacted or damaged, what can we do in the future to improve. Isn't necessarily the case for every championship, though, Graham, as you and I know. And I would say the bigger the organization, the more money, the deeper the staff, the more likely that will happen. If we're talking about what took place at the 24-hour at Spa, this is purely a question, not a backhanded criticism. I don't know if our friends there have as deep of a technical department to treat something like the crashes, the impacts that happened, with that full investigative approach. And so there is not, to my knowledge, any kind of global standard for championships, big, medium, and small, to go through an accepted practice when such a thing happens, produce the information on that list or to whatever criteria is set, and funnel that into a central place. We know the FIA is the world's largest sanctioning body and oversight group of motor racing, but they sure as heck don't oversee NASCAR. They don't oversee IndyCar. You can name a number of major championships that do not look to the FIA for stewardship or sanctioning. So there is not a communal thing yet. I think that there could be and should be, going with Cookie Monster's suggestions here. I think that this would not be a bad thing in a general sense for folks to think about creating. And I'll throw in one final point. I mean, the dumb statement of the episode coming from me right here. Motor racing is a very dangerous thing. There's I don't know if I want to say it's unwritten, Graham, but you know it, I know it, we all know it who are in the sport. If we don't have to, we're not necessarily trying to point out to the world that the thing we do can be fatal. And if there's a reason, of course we're going to talk about it, write about it, discuss it on television, podcast, whatever. We're always going to do our job. I would not say that there is a willingness to freely say, hey, look, someone died doing the thing we love, and have that become the drumbeat that we all fear will one day shut down the sport that we love. It's a completely ballless thing. Protectionism, right? Hey, we don't want the thing we love to go away, so let's not over-amplify the threats and concerns and the possible either fatalities or, ooh, boy, we almost killed somebody there. There's no dark ops voice, email, or text that comes in when the big crash at Reddit happens. Don't talk about this too much. Keep it quiet. That doesn't happen. I guarantee you that. But 100%. I do know that that there is a sensibility, and it doesn't just have to be from folks inside the sport. I think fans as well grasp, like, hey, there's an accepted element of danger. We know we can get hurt, but we don't want that to be the thing that has too many people saying, okay, so is the sport really necessary? How about let's just worry about stick and ball sports where cuts and bruises are the norm. A concussion is maybe or a broken arm, but other than that, we don't really have to talk about death or the high probability of fatalities. I just know that that's a sensitivity that almost everybody has, which might be a reason why shedding the appropriate amount of light on things like the crashes at Reddit isn't done to the full measure maybe it deserves.
I just had 2 or 3 points here. We do know that the sport can learn lessons from each other. Look at the safety seat technology in NASCAR, I think, for starters, DTM as well. The extraction hatch that's now mandatory in the top of all new GT cars. All of those have come from learning lessons from other areas of the sport. I think there are 2 other audiences, though, that actually have a degree of responsibility here if what you want is more information. One of those is you and me, Marshall. It is the media. It's the way that we respond to incidents and to the outcomes of those incidents. And I should say, by the way, before we go any further, I'll reference exactly what you've been through for the last 2 or 3 days. It's a horrendous experience as a journalist to be as close as you are to the people and the people around those people involved in such a major incident as befell Robert Wickens and others at the weekend. Your response to it has been, as it always is, because you've had more of this than most, exemplary. Sadly, others in our profession do employ what I might regard as being a more ambulance-chasing business model. And whilst that's there, that makes it less likely for the those that are responsible for looking into the causes here to trust the general audience. The second body of people, I think, do have some responsibility are you guys. It's the listeners. It's the people who pay to go in through the gate. It's the people who watch this on TV, and it's how you communicate about these things. It's not to say that you shouldn't discuss it. It's not to say that you shouldn't have opinion, but it is around not jumping the gun. It is about having the self-control to wait until we are told. That's exactly what we do in a press room, in a commentary booth. We wait. Okay, we wait until somebody who knows what they're talking about tells us what's actually happened. I'll go as far as to say, MP, and I'd be happy to be contradicted by you on this one. In those circumstances, I cannot think of a single occasion on which I have been told an untruth, ever. And it's happened a lot in terms of accidents where people may or have been hurt. And on only one occasion, thankfully, in my career, when I've been at a track where somebody was killed. So it is that thing about, in the modern era where you've got such immediate access to the opportunity to discuss, it is about that thing about keeping a degree of self-control. It's upsetting, it's awful, but keeping that speculation side of things just under a little bit of control. If we can do that, if we can be trusted to do that, my guess is that the shutters come up just a little bit into the world beyond that, with these very serious people doing incredibly serious jobs and trying to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes again in the sport, and we keep these instances and the headlines and the concerns and the follow on from that inevitably come along with it to the bare minimum.
And we're going to try and move on here in just a moment. I'll add one more element to this briefly, Graham. A couple of years ago, myself in particular, because I was the lead writer on this, and my colleague Robin Miller in IndyCar received fairly heavy backlash from a series we happen to cover, and I'll avoid specifics because they really aren't that pertinent, but we received extreme backlash from the series and even some of the drivers for our reporting on a driver's injury, and it was not rushed. Actually, it was more than 24 hours, I believe, after the accident, but we knew for a fact that the series was drastically and intentionally under-reporting the severity of the accident. Driver's life was not in jeopardy. We knew full well the driver was going to recover and lead a positive, happy life. Hoped that it would still be in a race car, but nonetheless, we knew for a fact, almost immediately, that what was being portrayed, for whatever reason, however they came to the decision, was vastly different from the reality of what had taken place in that incident. And we had about 17 different forms of confirmation and input as to the reality of the situation. And having waited, again, approximately 24 hours to see if anything veering towards the truth was going to be reported, and seeing that it was not, and after sitting and sitting and sitting, we published what we knew to be an accurate story. It was accurate, and huge backlash as a result. Series got mad, drivers got mad, etc. That's the only instance I can think of in my career where there was an intentional choice to not completely fall behind the series in the event of a major accident, and I'll give them complete control. And again, if this was a case of ambulance chasing and trying to get big headlines. That story could have been run just a few hours after the crash. We didn't learn anything new the next day when we did publish a story. The story was written that evening and was sitting there waiting. But the point being here, the only reason that went forward and was published is because we knew that there were either falsehoods. I shouldn't say falsehoods. There was an intentional amount of underreporting going on, which we could not figure out any reason why or think of any reason for that to stand as it was. Other than that, one exception, and it was a serious exception. Falling behind, as we're doing here with, as you mentioned, Robert Wickens, some of the things that have since been confirmed in official updates from the IndyCar series, I had heard about, and others I know because we discussed this privately, have heard the same things that have been confirmed now Tuesday morning. We'd heard about them Sunday after the crash. And again, I'm just sharing this. It's a little bit of inside baseball. This isn't any kind of this isn't meant to be anything other than just sharing. I realize the process here of what we do and trying to report and bring news to folks. It might be a weird thing, and maybe you don't care, and if so, please hit the fast forward button, because I'm sure this is boring. But it's a similar situation here, where had heard about some things that sounded severe shortly after the crash, and at least for what we and others have seen coming out from the series, while it might not paint a complete picture, I've seen the updates come out that have indeed depicted more of what we'd heard was the truth. And so therefore, at least making that assessment of is accurate news and accurate information being provided to the world via a sanctioning body, have to say yes. Have to say that while a full picture is not being presented, and I don't claim to have a full picture, and I know many others in our profession do not claim to have that full picture, you would be able to read the updates and come to the same type of conclusion that most of us were told could be happening a few days ago. So everything's lining up. It looks like there is the maximum level of comfort in transparency being offered, knowing that this news, whether it is a Robert Wickens or an Andy Merrick or a whomever, that news is not owned by you or me, Graham, anyone in the media,
nope,
any of the fans. That information is owned solely by the person involved in that crash and what they and or as delegates, their family agrees upon to have released to the public. If we go back to Andrew Palmer's massively unfortunate Pirelli World Challenge Series accident a couple of years ago, that family has chosen and has been highly protective since then, as is their right, that no information about Andrew's recovery, status, anything is being made available to the media. And we have seen some other journalists flip out and complain, thinking that it is their right and their birthright to have that information expressed, I believe, then recanted and or apologized. We've had some fans say, express some frustration. We live in a time where we seemingly know everything the minute that it happens, and sometimes it's hard when folks remind us that we are not entitled to everything that we want, and in this specific instance, news about degrees of injury, recovery, and otherwise, and sometimes it's a hard thing to swallow when you're not accustomed to having that roadblock put in front of you, but it is something we accept.
My final word on the subject, it's something I've said before in similar terms, in similar circumstances, which is I'd ask anybody, whether you're a journalist, young or experienced, or whether or not you're a fan, imagine for a moment, we talk about the motorsport family, and it is a family. Imagine for a moment this was a member of your family, and then think about how you would be feeling if the level of information that perhaps some of us would like to see or might feel we deserve in the aftermath of something like this was released before you knew. That's the yardstick. You're spot on, Marshall. These are serious matters and, life-changing for not just the people involved, but members of their family and their loved ones. Serious subjects. We like to be light-hearted on the Week in Sports Cars. This is one where I don't have much of a sense of humour about it at all. In fact, I have absolutely zero sense of humour about it. I come from a professional background where managing what information was put into the public domain made a massive difference to the ability for, really important systems, and for that matter, the actions of the public to recover as quickly as possible. This isn't dramatically different from that. The same rules apply. Your point about who owns that information, MP, is exactly what people should take away from that. It doesn't mean to say that these things shouldn't be looked in seriously in the aftermath. They absolutely should be. And I do have a view that more of that should be out there in the public in whatever format could be agreed. Lessons need to be learned. But, we're all of us, every single one of us, need to look at our own thoughts, our own actions, our own drive around these things to determine whether or not actually we're reacting in a way that, would do us proud moving forward. Fingers crossed for everybody involved in the weekend's events, and for those that are still, I'm afraid, feeling the effects of incidents and accidents long past.
And thank you to Cookie Monster for the awesome question that gave us a lot of different avenues to follow. You are listening to the Week in Sports Cars on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires and supported by PNC. Is proud to sponsor Scott Dixon, driver of the number 9 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. Scott knows that the road to victory lane starts today. Copyright 2018, the PNC Financial Services Group Incorporated. All rights reserved. PNC Bank, National Association, member FDIC. Graham Goodwin, there is this little piece of news that happened to come down in recent days. Something about, once the current WEC super season is done, are we going to have a quadruple super season afterwards? What the heck happens when we are finished with the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2019? Tell us about WEC calendar. Ooh, that's a big one.
Well, yeah. That one, I wouldn't say was sprung on us, but there wasn't a lot of notice about when we were going to get this. So this one came out during the WEC weekend at Silverstone. Lots and lots and lots of questions and a couple of really smart follow-ons, which I'll come to in a moment. But principally, the two major points being made by, amongst others, Floodman11 at Reddit again, some guy called Percy, yes, that is his handle, Ryan Terpstra again, Andrew Muggeridge, Enrique Bran. The two major questions, and then there's a couple of really intelligent follow-ups, as I say, are why so many clashes? Fair point, we'll come to that. And why the change in race distances, and in particular the one that has really annoyed people is that Silverstone becomes a 4-hour race, not a 6-hour race. Let's talk about the clashes first. At the moment, as things stand, there are potential clashes with a number of other important events, one of which is the Bathurst 12-hour clashes at the moment with the potentially clashes rather with the Sao Paulo 6 hours, with Brazil coming back onto the WEC calendar in February of 2020. Petit Le Mans again looks like it's got a clashing date in mid-October. There's also a clash with Shanghai and the FIA GTE World Cup at Macau, and there's clash too with the finale for the Blancpain Endurance Cup. Let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Let's go with Bathurst 12 hours. Happily, my good friend Richard Crail was at Silverstone.
Crailsy.
Absolutely, helping out with the Radio Le Mans and the circuit commentary for the ELMS and FI Formula 3. Richard, of course, is very much involved with the Bathurst 12-hour crew, and he tells me, look, there is a bit of wiggle room. The likelihood he thinks, and that's just Richard and I talking, is that there is certainly the potential for the date of the Bathurst 12 Hour to move back a week. Doesn't make it a particularly easy transition from Daytona the following week to Sao Paulo to Bathurst on a wonderful 2-week, near round the world trip. But that one potentially is not a clash. The Macau potential clash looks like that is solvable too. There is wiggle room on that one for the WEC. Don't think we're going to see any change that will affect any difference between Blancpain Endurance and the WEC. That is one I don't think they're that worried about. There's not a lot of carryover between the two. The one that I think will remain a clash is the one with Petit Le Mans, and there was a great deal of wailing and shrieking among certain elements in the press room about this one. And I should tell you that Gerard Neveu was having very literally none of that, making it abundantly clear that in this instance, that date for Petit Le Mans was moved this year, as I recall, and I wasn't in the room for this exchange, by the way, as I recall, because of a football match. There was a game, and the date of Petit Le Mans was moved to avoid that. It has stayed in the date to which it was moved. So in that instance, because of course it clashes again with the Fuji round, there are all sorts of things in play here, one of which is, and for lots of archaic reasons, there is a small window of availability of tracks and dates for a number of international series which visit Japan. It's tied in with logistics, and that is just a subject I just don't want to get too much into because it blows my mind almost as much as the OT does. So there are a very fixed number of dates for Japan that WEC can go for. My impression from this is that there was an intention to avoid a clash, and that the announcement by IMSA of the date staying roughly where it was in the literal calendar for the 2019 calendar was something of a surprise to the WEC. So whilst I think there's a degree of flexibility available in a number of instances, the Fuji date is not one where they have that flexibility. It's principally caused by the need to reduce cost and transfer the required goods by sea between Fuji and Shanghai. Getting goods into China can be problematic. It needs longer, etc., etc., etc. But it is fair to say that I think there is a degree of, how can we put this? There's a degree of irritation about the fact that that clash has come about in the way that it does. And certainly that is one where the response from the WEC side indicates that anybody seeing this as a one-way street might well not be correct.
I find it, I will continue to find it interesting, Graham. The announcement of an international calendar coming after a domestic calendar with IMSA had its State of the Series announcements on a variety of topics here earlier this month in Road America. Granted, not a lot of time separating the next WEC calendar announcement from IMSA's. It's not as if the two organizations are separated on that topic as well. They obviously share notes on what they are planning and thinking ahead of time. But when I think of this somewhat still far away WEC next calendar after the super season is done, it's a bit of a general thought. I don't know if our listeners and other fans are wondering the same thing, but I'll be very curious to see what that WEC looks like, what the series looks like at that point, this far ahead. What are we going to have for LMP1 hybrid? I hope we still have Toyota, and if I'm forgetting that they've announced that they're going to stay for the next X amount of years after the super season, I apologize, but
long-term commitment is what we're being told. Yeah.
So no exact number on what year, but I hope that we still have Toyota there. I don't know what our LMP1L class will look like, the non-hybrids. What could the GTE Pro class look like with Ford's anticipated winding up of the factory side of its GT program possible? Could there be a fewer GTE Pro cars? Could those transition into GTE AM once homologation for GTE AM is, I believe, done or hopefully completed to make that possible? Normally when we talk about calendars, we just talk about dates, clashes, etc., as you have just done. Just think it'll be interesting, for me at least, to see if what we have today with the WEC looks the same when we get to that calendar. And this is the first time I've really had these considerations.
It's a fair point. It's a fair point. I think in this instance as well, by the way, it would be obviously a completely wrong headed move to consider that in some way the WEC has responded to the announcement of Road America. A number of these dates will have been more than penciled in a long time ago. So what they've done is they've made this announcement at the first available opportunity. I think this is earlier than we've had a calendar before ever for the WEC. It was actually something I I didn't make myself the best friend to the FIA president for asking questions about this in the very early days of the WEC, and I don't think he's still very comfortable sharing house room with me after I did question him rather pointedly about the process that the FIA goes through with their World Championship calendars. Things have improved markedly since then, but my guess would be that the date for Fuji was, if not agreed, then certainly tabled quite some time ago, possibly as long ago as 12 months ago, is the honest answer. So that's the one in terms of the clashes. As for the 4-hour part of things, I know there's been much irritation by the fact that Gerard Neveu has tabled the much vaunted fan survey undertaken by everybody's favourite massive motorsports media organisation.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, sorry. Having visions
yeah,
of
absolutely.
the Death Star.
And I'm sure in no way have they used that to their advantage commercially. But and many people pointing out that actually the graphs do not support the premise that 4-hour races are favoured by the fans. Indeed, it doesn't. What is favoured by the fans is a mix of formats, and I think where the disconnect has come is, of course, what fans want is more racing. What the teams want generally is less cost. Why has Silverstone fallen to be one of the areas where you get a 4-hour rather than a 6-hour, and in 2 cases now an 8-hour race, as Bahrain added to the calendar again, will become an 8-hour race? I don't know, is the honest answer. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, I didn't see Gerard Neveu after the announcement of this calendar. I will, I'm sure, see him in the coming weeks, and I will ask him that question. What I would say, and this is potentially good news for those that like to at least see the sports cars at Silverstone rather than necessarily seeing them racing, there's 2 balancing points. One is, together with Sebring, it is one of the only races where we do get a double header of major sports car action. In the case of Sebring, of course, it will be the 1,000 miles plus the 12 hours with WEC and IMSA. That fixture seems to be confirmed again for the coming season. And of course, at Silverstone, we get, well, in this year's case, 40 plus cars for the ELMS and 30 plus cars for the WEC. In addition to that, in the absence of a prologue, I believe it is likely we might well see some very significant testing at Silverstone in the days before that race. And it traditionally has been the case that testing for at least part of the time is open to the public. It was, if you recall, when we first visited the Nürburgring back in the day, with the track opening up one of the grandstands and the opportunity for, I think, a partially open paddock on the second day. And I would expect in this instance, because it will be effectively the opening race of the season, the opening race of the season, I would expect there will be some tarantara applied around that as well. It will give them the opportunity to do some media work. We've always had the case that the public have been made welcome on at least one of the days, both at Monza when it was there 2 years ago and at Paul Ricard for each of the other occasions. So my guess would be that a UK audience will get a second opportunity to see the cars running. You know what? I get it. I absolutely get it. That if you wanted 6 hours of racing, you're only getting 4 hours of racing, you're feeling a little bit cheated. I have to say, honestly, personally, I'm just not that excited about that level of the debate. It's just not something that, for me, that I'm feeling necessarily kind of cheated by. I watch and commentate on a lot of 4-hour racing in the manner of the ELMS, and I have to say I quite like that format. It'll be interesting to see what comes to that format for the FIA WEC and whatever, as you say, MP, whatever grid they manage to point at it. So let's wait and see whether or not that one actually comes out. There's one other question, by the way, about calendar, and it's a clever one, and you sort of touched on part of it, MP. And it comes
partial touching. I've been accused of that before. I
absolutely
deny all allegations.
Legal in some states, I gather. Enrique Brand says, with the release of the 2019-2020 calendar, WC calendar, how do you think it'll affect the homologation process for future cars, given the season starts in September? Will teams have to wait a year and a half to get their car approved? It's hit this year already, of course, with the brand new Aston Martin not being available to GT&amp teams in the 2019 portion of the season, whilst it will be available for IMSA competition in the early part of it. There's all sorts of ways in which these regulations sort of need to be rethought. One of them, I was asked the question on air over the weekend, is about the driver rankings. So if you start as a silver on your mighty quick and you're up to gold ranking in the FIA driver rankings, which of course are on a calendar year basis, how does that affect you? I have to say, I don't actually know the answer, but I suspect it's exactly the same way as it affects the Asian Le Mans series, which is you keep the ranking that you get at the start of the season through to the end of that season, even if it means that you're maybe someone like, for instance, Andrea Pizzitola, the remarkably quick silver-ranked driver racing for G-Drive in the LMS. I think it's unfeasible that if he was a WEC driver that he would be effectively pushed out of that team in January. It doesn't happen in the Asian Le Mans series. We have had numerous occasions where drivers have been re-ranked. The most recent, of course, was Thomas Laurent getting a gold ranking. He stayed as a silver-ranked driver in the Asian Le Mans series until the end of their season in February. So as for homologation of the cars, it's a great question, and I genuinely don't yet know the full answer to it. My guess would be that this is going to be one that's going to be a real problem for some of the GT manufacturers. Are the WEC going to be happy with a situation where effectively, potentially a rival series, IMSA, gets new cars and they don't? No, they're not. That's going to have to be fixed. The only other area, of course, that currently comes to bear is with GT3 racing, where we've had with the Bathurst 12-hour, they don't allow the new cars to race because it operates with effectively SRO rules and SRO balanced performance for the GT3 cars, and the homologations for GT3 cars do not come in until the 1st of March. That race traditionally takes place the beginning of February. But again, IMSA applies its own rules, doesn't it, MP?
They do, and I know, having done a bit of research, and when I say research, I don't mean things that other people haven't already known, just to educate my own little brain. Ford has built 8 GTs to GTE Pro / GTLM specification since the program launched in 2016, and I believe 7 of those 8 are available for competition. 24-hour winner is in a museum, so of the 8, 7 are available for potential customer use once the factory programs wind down. as you rightly mentioned, Graham, if someone wanted to continue using them here in IMSA, there is, to my knowledge, no extra layer of homologation required for them to be used in the WEC in GTE AM. There would be a new homologation required for an old chassis to be compliant and then be used following the end of this current 2018/2019 super season. So there is something there, whether it's a new car that Aston Martin would love to have available to customers in AM for the 2019 portion, or whether it's Ford just with its current arsenal that could be available following Le Mans in June next year. There is that little bit of procedural requirement on the WC side needed to make that happen over there, and that also dovetails a little bit into something we wrote about, and that is Ford. I'd heard a couple of things. I'd been fully convinced by many people that the possibility of doing a DPI program, which we'd known about, that was an active topic of interest, but was fully convinced by a number of people that had been shut down. Folks had been informed wasn't going to happen, and was very happy to receive information that clarified that as maybe not being completely accurate, and for something possibly as soon as 2020, which would be the correct timeline following the end of the 2019 season for when we know the 4-year IMSA GTLM program is meant to wind down. So I'm really happy to hear that this could be happening. I also wonder, we don't have an answer on this yet, Graham, which chassis supplier they would use if they were to commission a DPI program. I think, purely a think, not a no, but I think it would not be with their partners who manufacture the Ford GT itself. So something else for us to put on our list to keep track of here in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Let's go to Thomas Pendergrass. Graham, we are jumping into the world of LMP1, EOT, hypercars, and all form of goodness there. He says, if LMP1 non-hybrid was left more or less the same, and manufacturers would allow in, would that be a reasonable option going forward if this hypercar stuff doesn't work out?
Right. Well, it's one of a number of questions about current state of affairs with the hypercar debate. This is, of course, the 2020-2021 proposed regulations for the ACO side of what looks like it's a top-class sports prototype divide. Beyond that, you're quite right, Thomas's question, also asked by Daniel Tripp. Seb Ben 11 also says, in the unlikely situation no manufacturers join hypercars, and FIA ACO does not amend the rules to essentially become DPI, do the current P1 rules remain? Nick Andrews, similar question. How does the ACO solve perennial challenge of having to appeal to OEMs versus having a rule book in a format that's fair and open to privateers? Chris Foster, hello Chris. Seemed everybody's treading water until 2020 if the new hypercar regulations don't work out due to lack of interest. What, if anything, do you think is the backup plan? Right, lots of questions, similar kind of theme, and what it all comes around is there enough interest? Is there a plan B? What happens to the existing cars? And I think the honest answer right now,
LMP5. LMP5.
No. LMP4.
Sorry.
We'll come back to that. But coverage elsewhere around who was in the room. That's been something of a blind alley for a couple of people have written on that front. Toyota, we said earlier in the show, long-term commitment from them. Aston Martin making it clear in informal discussions, but on the record that they very much were involved in the discussions. There are a couple of different opinions as to what McLaren's involvement in the discussion might actually mean. Some writing it off, others basically saying it's all guns blazing and definitely going to happen. Truth of the matter is it's somewhere in between, is that they are waiting to hear more rounded outline of what these proposals are going to actually mean before whether or not they commit. Ferrari have been in the room, continue to be in the room for some of these discussions. My view is unlikely to commit for a factory program, but I think every possibility that there might be something around that might see the prancing horse involved at the top level of sports car racing in one frame of rules or the other in the not too distant future. But then again, how many times have we said that in the last 20 years? Reality is that the FIA ACO need to move really fast if we're going to get even remotely close to the time frame that they've set for themselves for these regulations. Remember, this is 2020-2021 season that we're talking about. We've effectively got, realistically, a season and a half of traditional time to do this for cars that don't currently exist and that we don't currently have a rule book for. Fundamentally different underpinnings from the current cars. So you are talking brand new cars from a blank screen, because that's what will happen in a reasonably short order at this point. I have zero doubt that the likes of TMG and Cologne have already got conceptual designs on screen, and I'm sure they're not the only ones. What do I think is going to happen? I think at the moment we're looking reasonably confident of 2 to 3 factories. Beyond that, you've got others that have made it clear they are interested in some form of solution. We've heard about Glickenhaus, we've heard about the Brabham, the nascent Brabham organisation, saying they're interested. 1 or 2 of the specialist chassis manufacturers have clearly made it obvious that they're keen on working with either larger OEMs or indeed some of the smaller hypercar manufacturers.
And that was the nascent Brabham team, not the Nissan Brabham team.
Indeed.
Although maybe we should start a little rumor here. Hashtag Nissan Brabham.
What it's not is dead on arrival. Okay. Do I think they need to move fast? I think they need to move remarkably fast. And I think they need to start answering some of the questions that are being asked. We need to see pretty quickly a development of the outline that was presented in June. I'm sure that is the subject of a great deal of discussion in the various working groups that are going on. What do I think about Ford? I think you're right. What you said earlier on Ford is absolutely bang on. They are not going to find, at the moment, a global solution to this. So it's either going to be a prototype in North America or it's going to be nothing. Is there a fallback plan? If you think right now anybody at the FIA ACO technical working group is going to say, well, if this doesn't work, we can go DPI, you are literally insane. That is going to happen. If that were to happen, it would be, frankly, an emergency move based on next to no take-up of their new ideas. What might happen with the current breed of LMP1 non-hybrids? I think there's no doubt in my mind there's going to have to be some form of grandfathering. It's certainly within the right area of performance that we're looking for these very slightly dialed back, well, not very slightly, but dialed back LMP1 type performance. The reality is today, it's not as bleak as is being presented in other avenues, but neither is it yet the shining ray of light that I think the organising bodies for the FIWC and the Le Mans 24 Hours would like to think that it was going to be. Do we yet know what the issues are that are preventing it being the latter? We don't. Because the people in the room aren't talking about it. The people who are out of the room, some of them are. But at the moment, it's pretty active engagement from a number of people looking to try to draw these things together. The difficulty, of course, here is that you've already got an active process with DPI moving forward on a broadly similar timescale. The odd thing here, MP, is I'm beginning to hear just the kind of suggestions that there might be a coming together of regulation in a very unexpected fashion. Don't want to say much about that at the moment, but suffice to say, the key to it is going to be the money. If you're looking to get private teams involved, then the reality is that the original proposal we heard about in June is too much. That was again underpinned by some off-the-record comments from a number of people at Silverstone, including the likes of Hugh de Schonack, who's made it very clear publicly previously that this needs a further substantial cutback. I think we're going to start to see some very interesting moves in the weeks and months to come. Whether or not that might actually help to, if not draw together the two potential rule sets, but certainly see that some level of coexistence might be quite interesting.
GT convergence with prototypes. How could that not work out? Based on past experience, an absolutely simple and flawless process, aided by group interests. We have some fun questions as usual. I have an idea, Mr. Goodwin, as we start to wind down here, as we head into our final stint. Let's sprinkle in some fun ones in between the serious ones. And Matthew Guy Richard has a question for me that maybe you should pose, because maybe you've wondered as well.
What the hell is a straightaway?
What? What isn't a straightaway? A corner?
Well, straightaway is right now. Straightaway is right now. I mean, or it's a straight away from something. But I must admit, I've always struggled with that straightaway. It's a straight.
And it's a straight that takes you away. So,
or two. A straight two. Why not a straight two?
That's another possibility, at least
straight here.
In American colloquialisms, because I think we figured out I speak American, and possibly, although I try not to make it that obvious of my regional dialect, but it's possibly an American - Californian dialect. But straight away, I can't say when I heard that for the first time. I'm thinking it might have been a NASCAR broadcast that has the right feel to it, but straight away, at least here in the good old North of America, in the good old U.S. of the A, straight away is not that unfamiliar of an expression, but maybe I just particularly like it more than others. So with that,
Matthew Guy Richard, a man of Kent, it should be said, I think he would file that one under the epic title of Making America Great Again, and that's spelling great, Grate.
Well, if anything, I would like to think of myself as someone who is definitely a person who would wear a red makeup. No, okay, actually I wouldn't, but that's just me. All right, so that's a fun one. Let's get back to a serious one, then we'll do a fun one after that. Let's see. I'll go with a GT-related question from Michael Goodyear. Hi, GG and MP. Not sure if this is a case of, quote, inside baseball, to use Marshall's phrase. All right, we're on MP's phrases. But are there any clues as to which teams Aston Martin might join forces with to run their cars, if planned, with a 2019 GTLM effort, if that ever becomes a real thing? And then Adam Bowman adds to that, what do y'all know about Aston Martin wanting to run a factory-backed GTLM program in IMSA next year? Since that lovely manufacturer is from your aisle, would you kindly give us some insight as to whether you've heard any more about GTLM adventures being added to the GTE efforts in the WEC?
Very much so. It's very much on their principal target list to get to GTLM efforts into the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. That would lead what they hope will be a growing relationship with a service provider, a team, to also act as time moves forward as the customer support on both coasts of your fair country to support GT3/GTD and GT4 customers in the North American marketplace. They're looking for a partner organization. Now, of course, that comes with some constraints. That means that if you are a team that has one operating base, you are unlikely to be successful without some further partnership or some investment in resources. You're then looking at perhaps those organizations that either got multiple operating bases or have multiple alliances with other race teams and or automotive organizations. So it starts to bring down pretty rapidly the number of organisations that could actually provide that level of service. So for me, I mean, what I know that they're in a process at the moment of whittling down, as you might well imagine, a large number of organisations that are keen to get a piece of that pie. I think from Aston Martin's point of view, they don't want people to have a piece of the pie. They want them to invest in the whole darn thing. That tends to kind of restrict the pot somewhat. I think we'll start to hear things pretty rapidly, but I do expect to see Aston Martin doing rather more in the United States next year. It'll include, for certain, the first of the GTE customer cars. I think we expect to see the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, and that car has been bought by none other than the wonderful Canadian bear himself, Paul Dell'Olana.
I was hoping you were going to say D3 Transformers Racing, but that did not come to pass.
Remember, MP, he cannot race that car in the WEC this season. That includes he can't race it at Sebring in the WEC, at Spa, or at the Le Mans 24 Hours in GTM.
Unfortunately, yes. And also just worth a quick note that Aston Martin has had a kind of sort of vaguely a little bit factory link here in North America in recent years, that being with the Racers Group based about an hour and 20 minutes north of me here in the Bay Area. That was a program and relationship that did have legs. I mean, there was active participation in the Pirelli World Challenge Series, in IMSA, in GTD a little bit. We had some beautiful V12s screaming. Definitely a growth of GT4 Aston Martin content as well, and that has certainly also been on a fairly steep and rapid decline. So I welcome whichever entity that joins forces with AMR to bring their, their stature back to what it was, and to know that when we go to motor races, we are going to see that lovely badge on a number of vehicles in either sprint racing form, Graham, or endurance racing. All right, let's pick from the silly. Where do you want to go?
Let's go for... It's not so much silly as general, really. Chinese manufacturers have been mentioned lately quite a lot as being coming from a rapidly growing and emerging marketplace and having global ambitions for their road car products. And James Fox asks, if Chinese manufacturers do ever enter sports car racing, what entry point would it take? GT or prototype? Asia Le Mans Series? Straight in the WEC? With this in mind, already involved in the ACO's GTP negotiations. James, I think touring car racing should also be considered, and that's, I think, a far more likely entry point for multiple of the myriad of Chinese manufacturers. But if they were coming to the sports car racing market, almost inevitably it would be with the prototype field. Why? Because you're not going to jump straight into the marketplace from effectively white goods type commuter cars into major high-end GT cars, unless we do get someone who's really aspirational mark coming in at GTE or GT3. So my guess would be a badging deal for an engine might well be it, or some kind of naming deal around a GT, an LMP2 a la Alpine, or LMP1 privateer team in the first instance, maybe stepping up with something akin to a hypercar when we get to 2020, 2021. There where I think the best opportunities actually lie for them. Remains to be seen. As for what's going on politically with North America at the moment, that might be a bit more difficult, MP.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing that really comes to mind there is, I mean, we've been hearing about interest, not just Chinese manufacturers, but also Korean and so on. We've been hearing about interest for quite some time. I would genuinely love, it's a dumb statement, but it's maybe more out of frustration is the exact way to put it, Graham, but I've been hearing about this interest, it seems like almost as long as there's been interest to talk about. And obviously on the Chinese side, I would say that automotive sector is something that has exploded in particular in the last couple of years. But we've had Korean manufacturers really on the uptake for quite some time now. And obviously, there have been areas where Korean marques have participated in a variety of series, but getting up to what we know as the top tier prototypes, that's the thing where I just keep hoping it happens. Japanese, fantastic, but just hoping that we can extend and spread that a little bit more throughout that portion of the world.
Yeah, they came close. Hyundai came close some years ago when we started an open-engine formula in LMP2 to a deal. But yeah, I think it's high time. We've got Hyundai touring cars. We've had lower end, if you like, GT touring cars from Hyundai, and we've obviously had the Kia efforts in GTS in Pirelli World Challenge. Time for a step up. That would be good to see, wouldn't it?
I want a Kia in something. Some sort of twin-turbo V6 Stinger power plant, IMSA, WEC, ELMS, I don't care. Let's just make it happen. Let's see. Where shall we go as we wind down our episode, my friend? Let's see.
Should I hit you with a couple of quick fire ones?
Well, hold on. You just went from kick to hit. So, okay,
Kick,
Mr.
hit,
Passive-Aggressive. Whatever.
Wallop. Elliot Bonjovi, I think it's Bonjovi. I'm going to say Bon Jovi because it's a brilliant name. Where has the McLaren GT effort been? They were running North American events, noticeably absent from GTD and PwC Racing. Well, a couple of things to say. McLaren have announced that they're going to be launching a 720 GT3 alongside their 570 GT4. I can tell you the first car exists. I have seen pictorial evidence of it. It exists. Has it run yet? Well, I'm not at liberty to say that it hasn't. But certainly things well underway there. Why have they been quiet? It's been a bit of a transition from where we were to where we now are. McLaren taking things back in-house from the previous days of their GT organisation. That has not been without some growing pains of the legalistic kind. That is on the road to being solved, and I think you'll be hearing rather more about McLaren and their customer GT programs in the pretty near future. There's another couple of quick ones here. One of the headlines around Daily Sports Car earlier today, Gibson did indeed, James Ryder, complete 1 million racing kilometres or racing and testing kilometres in LMP2 with their fabulous 4.2 litre V8 engine this week. How many failures have there been? Very, very few. What is the rebuild schedule like? There's something like 50 of those engines in circulation. I think it is indeed 50 in circulation. What you do with a Gibson engine for LMP2 is that you effectively buy mileage, and at a given time that track support will basically recall that engine and replace it with a fresh engine, but you're paying for blocks of mileage on those engines or kilometerage on those engines. It doesn't therefore matter too much how long it takes. So in other words, you're not losing your engine to go back all the way to Repton in Derbyshire in the UK to come back later. They take one engine, they replace it with another engine. So it's the on-track supported IMSA, WEC and ELMS. There are spare engines, a very small quantity of spare engines available. There are others in the rebuild cycle. But it has been a phenomenally successful project, I think, in LMP2. I would prefer that there was some more variety, but if you're going to have one engine, then let it look and sound like that. It's a fabulous little thing. So also asking, James, about the LMP3 cars. Would they sound even better with more revs? I believe they're turned down for a rebuild-free season. Is that right? They're turned down for reliability. Absolutely right. Watch for news on that front. Are they capable of producing more horsepower? Isn't everything, but at a cost. And that's the point here, is that you're talking about low-cost racing. Pump another 40 or 50 horsepower through that thing. You're going to get more issues, you're going to get higher running costs, you're going to get more failures, and there is a degrading pool of availability for that engine. Watch this space.
That's a great name for a band. Degrading pool of availability. Coming to the Fox Theater. What instrument would you play in that band, by the way, Graham?
Me? I would be a tuba.
You would be a tuba. I like that. You would play yourself. I don't want to say you'd blow yourself, because that I wouldn't say that, because that would be inappropriate.
Without musical talent entirely.
Okay. Well,
I'm pleased to say my young daughter is the complete opposite to me in that one. Taught herself to read and write music and plays several musical instruments, bless her, and it's a delight to me that she does so.
I am blessed with immense musical talent, that of the ability to listen to music talent.
You, me both, absolutely.
And a little, I don't know, I think I've maybe only told this to my wife, not as if it means anything, it's just one of those dumb things that never has a logical place to insert, except for here, and please don't touch that statement. I played the trumpet in grade school, and for whatever reason, either I did not grasp the concept of reading music, either I tried to and I could figure it out, or I just didn't try at all. I don't honestly remember what was the case, but playing in the little school band doing a recital for family and such, I can tell you that my first recital was my last, being a member of the trumpet section, and if folks heard one trumpet that was a beat behind all the others, it was me, because I spent this entire, I think it was a half-hour recital, and this would have been 4th grade, so I don't know, I might have been 8 or 9 years old. I just spent the entire time looking to the right, watching the finger movements of the trumpet player next to me who could read the music. And that's effectively what I did. Such a sad conviction for me as a young person and as a student, playing the trumpet, but actually having to watch someone else's finger movements.
Tape delay, mate. Tape delay.
Oh,
and you know what?
Horrible.
Tape delay brings us wonderfully into another set of questions, which is to do with... There you go. It's to do with various questions about the TV offer, or the moving picture offer, I think we should probably call it nowadays, to do sports car racing. Kiwi Chris, 1709, one of our Reddit readers, and Bonnie _last47, which must be a Reddit name. All sorts of things here. Kiwi Chris repeating the angst we've had about WEC and the offering on streaming services in the US. It's tied into a more traditional TV deal, although the reason for the geo-blocking is absolutely to do with the Motortrend On Demand offer. All sorts of questions about this. We are entering a completely different phase in broadcasting history, without a shadow of a doubt, where streaming of specialist events is becoming the most de rigueur offer. I mean, to give you, for instance, I'm about to bin my satellite/cable provider, and almost everything that we take into this household will be done via streaming, because one, it's a hell of a lot cheaper, and two, there's an awful lot more choice at a very much more conservative cost. And I use that as conservative as as not in the way that liberal is often used as an insult, but as a literal description of what I expect to happen from that. Bonnie Lass actually says she foresees a time coming where confluence of modestly priced video equipment and drones might result in hobbyists being able to provide coverage of live races. I sincerely hope not. I can't think of anything more likely to cause problems and chaos. We've already had race meetings interrupted by rogue drones here, there, and everywhere. For me, what you want is quality. It's not just pictures, it's the supporting commentary and data that come with that. You'd expect that from someone who partially earns his living doing exactly that. But the reality is what you need are people who understand what they're seeing to explain that to an established and we hope a widening audience. I think hobbyists have their place, but you're getting into a massive, massive legal hole if what you're effectively doing is throwing the doors open to anybody that's got the ability to put pictures from one place and put them in the other. I see little through the good offices of the likes of YouTube, through what might be termed hobbyists in a number of areas, that lead me to believe anything other than what you'll see is a massive degradation in quality. For the most part, I think most races and series have got this not a million miles away from being correct. I share the concerns and the frustrations of our American friends about the offer of the WEC. It is my personal view that the WEC's online streaming option should be provided free of charge. Clearly, that's not the business model that's been determined by those that offer me employment at those races. That is for them to justify. But it is remarkably simple to follow the vast majority of the major and even some of the minor, in fact, most of the minor races, series and championships in our great world of sports car racing worldwide. It's not been like that until this point in history. So, yes, when you've got the major offers like WEC and IMSA and Blancpain, etc., you can compare apples and oranges and come up with a conclusion. The reality is, it's a famous British political statement that came just about half a century ago, maybe a little longer. You have literally never had it so good. My guess is it will only get better, because to keep up nowadays, you've got to match the best.
Yeah, match the best, dang you. And again, try not to be too snide or snarky here, but I enjoy professional presentation immensely. And I won't claim to be professional in anything that I present, but I can tell you that the lines between professional, non-professional continue to be blurred, because, frankly, most people have the ability to publish anything.
Yes.
Both online, publish through whatever they want. If you want to make a documentary and make that happen, the means exist, from drones to super HD, 4K, you name it, quality. That's pretty amazing, where if you are a fan, if you are an amateur, you can produce content that looks as good, if not better, or almost as good as the pros. The only thing that honestly would separate a pro from an amateur is experience and
knowledge. I think you're absolutely right. I don't wish to belittle people putting together really good visual content. There's actually another great question which you could wrap into this one, which comes from sports car engineering blogger Trevor. Says his question is, what would be your one small-scale sports car content creator, journalist, photographer that more people need to know about? That's a good question.
Very true. And I'm
going to go immediately, by the way, for one who's been around for quite a while, and simply because it plays to one of my passions, and that's Mike Fuller and the Mulsanne's Mike site, which looks at sports car design and aerodynamics, an area in which I'm not expert, but I've learned a lot from reading the pages of Mulsanne Mike's website, and indeed their associated Facebook group. But there are so many of them. I'd just say this.
Murphy the Bear, man. I mean, you and I wake up every morning, go to murphythebear.com.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Is that a drone strike I see coming in from England here?
Probably.
Okay,
it's probably on me again.
Sorry.
It's all my fault.
No, I'm with you, but I would also add to that, because there is a lot of linkage there, and that is racecar-engineering.com. There are some very strong archives. I mean, you can go there to get current, up-to-date everything about the Toyota TS050, etc., but there's some really strong archives as well, done by our friends Andrew Cotton, Sam Collins, and so on. There's some great retro content, and very much linkage, lots of linkage between the two, and full props to Mulsanne Mike, whose website, before I came over to the dark side here from the team side and started being one of the dirty journalists, Mike introduced me to the folks at Race Car Engineering and opened the door for me to start contributing there. And that was just a dream of a lifetime, because I have almost every issue of Race Car Engineering ever published, and that's because the moment that I saw it hit the newsstands here in North America, even though I think it cost $470 per issue, what a crazy amount of money, but still, as a 20-year-old or something, seeing it was just, oh my God, and I still look back to it like, this is motor racing technology Bible material. And so, anyways, Mulsanne Mike's archives, as you mentioned, you can go back, you can lose yourself for days in the amount of amazing content there, and then you can also pop over to racecar-engineering.com and lose more days on top of that.
I should actually say as well, it's all those little things that the people who are actually active on the web that they're just offering something different. It came pretty late to me, but Race Car Engineering also has a wonderful database of links to current regulations for all the major championships. So if that's the kind of thing that floats your boat, if you're looking to win a debate in any kind of internet forum, the regulations are normally where you're going to find that answer. And Race Car Engineering has got all of that all in the one place.
We should also note that although we appreciate many of the words that Sam Collins has written, truly loathsome human being, though. Just one of the worst of the worst.
Politician now.
There's no prison we could find that is low enough to suit him. Just truly. Talk about suffering.
Anything you hear that's good about Sam, just discounted immediately.
No. And think about this. We limit ourselves to 3 uses of the BOP term and or topic per episode. We've actually written out in the bylaws of the Weekend Sports Cars, there's 1 Sam Collins reference allowed per year. So we're done. We're not allowed to bring him up anymore. So that's how bad of a person he is.
I can't say anything now.
No, we're done. We're all done.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll move on.
All right, that silliness aside, where should we go for our last couple of goodies, my friend?
Let's have a quick look. GTE, GTLM. We all love that. S. Samios says, what's the future look like for GTE? Status quo? Are there new manufacturers, new regulations hiding in the wings? Stephen Scott says, what's the fate of GTLM if Ford drops and Aston Martin declines to join? Is a WeatherTech session, so this is obviously an IMSA question, feasible for customer GTD teams, or will factory-assisted teams be the norm? You want to kick off with that one?
No, I want you to take that one.
Well, we've already mentioned Ford and the likely finite time that program has actually got available. We know that what looked likely to be a McLaren GTE program didn't as much wither on the vine, was blowtorched off it. So that one appears to have gone. Lamborghini appear to be now considering what might be their future in global motorsports based on some utterances on hypercar. Quite an interesting one there. So, whilst looking into we definitely might not do that, nobody's actually mentioned what they definitely might do instead, if anything at all. I think the answer is it's a formula that works. BOP has become a little bit of a millstone around its neck. But what you've got at the moment are a reasonably healthy number of major OEMs that have committed quite recently to new machinery. Everybody, I'm sure, listening to this podcast has seen and read about the potential for a new offering from Corvette, yet to be determined. The Porsche 911 RSR program going very strongly indeed. Strong demand for customer cars there. Latest batch of those in the process of being issued. We saw the first of them active over the weekend in the ELMS. Aston Martin, long-term commitment to their GT racing platform with the new V8 Vantage GTE, the twin-turbo version of that with an associated GT3 product attached to it. So if Ford go, will someone replacement? Well, we wait and see, I think is the answer there. But at the moment, there's enough there, I believe, to sustain a pretty healthy class, both on a continental side in North America and on a WEC side. It would only need one more factory to commit, or indeed a loosening of the regulations to allow potentially customer teams to come in with a single or 2 cars. That, though, might need a little bit of attention being paid to the kind of budgets that we're talking about for GTE. GTE AM, well, the reports of the death of that class were very much exaggerated, weren't they, by the likes of Gerard Neveu and Pierre Fillon. I remember, in fact, at Daytona this year, bumping into the president of the ACO, who actually said to me, you were right about GTEM, that a year and a half ago they were talking about the potential for maybe this might be dropped. We've never had healthier GTE AMP grid in terms of numbers for the World Endurance Championship, and particularly at the Le Mans 24 Hours. It's a bit different, of course, MP, in the North American Championship, where GTE customer teams have effectively gone.
Let me grab a couple here, and then I think we should just close on some of the funnies. All right, let's start with Martin Jones. Said BMW had a great weekend on one side of the pond, that being the overall win at the Michelin GT Challenge at VIR by BMW Team RLL and their M8 GTE, and a disappointing one on the other in the WEC series. When he asks, is it just a case of IMSA getting the BOP more correct or incorrect than the FIA/ACO has? Probably two things at play here, Martin. The M8, obviously brand new in 2018. Power plant, not so much. That twin-turbo V8 with the hot V mounting for the turbos. The M8 optimized version of the M6 on IMSA, or on the IMSA side, they've had a couple years with its predecessor, the M6 GT3, which was built up specifically and only for use in IMSA. While the M8, again, does have some differences, I would say there's an element of familiarity here with the car that would have made it easier for IMSA to dial it in or out of competitiveness this year, restating something we've touched on a number of times, actually beginning with our debut episode right after the Rolex 24. It was great to see BMW win last weekend in VIR. We also know that the first race for the car at Daytona was something that inspired our friends at BMW to issue a very harshly and direct, actually shouldn't say harsh, a very blunt and direct statement on their expectations for BOP accuracy and working with the series moving forward. So here we are with only 2 races left in the season, and we have seen the BMWs run strong at some points, more in the second half of the season, Martin, but I would say that it's been a long time coming. It was great to see, but we also had Richard Westbrook seemingly with the race in hand for the first hour of the 2 hour and 40-minute contest, and probably the only reason Ford did not win their 5th in a row is they had driveline issues that forced them off track. We also had Porsche leading soon after that as well and had a blown engine, so I wouldn't say that the BMWs were primed for victory from the outset. It took some adversity to get them there, but I would definitely compliment IMSA at getting to a place with the M8 GTE in the latter stages of the season where it was competitive enough to hold off the remaining Ford, the remaining Porsche, and the Corvettes as well, to go for the victory. And with the car being brand new to the ACO and FIA, not a surprise that they have not been particularly competitive. And Graham, knowing those sanctioning bodies' approach to how they treat newish entities coming in through BOP, rarely do they allow a brand new manufacturer/car to show up and upset the running order with those who are already established members of the GTE Pro community.
Well, I think there's 2 or 3 other factors as well in play here. One is, let's not forget that BMW Team M-Tech has not run endurance racing before. So there's a learning curve to be done there. There will be a lot of people from BMW Motorsports helping out, I'm sure, but there is that learning curve. Second thing is, it is the physicality of that car. There is no 2 ways about it. It does rather look like someone dressed in Doc Martin boots trying to do Swan Lake. It is a physically very big car. Now that, by the way, that is not what the makers initially intended. Remember, spooling back to the genesis of that project, they wanted something that was very much more low-slung, that effectively had a slice taken out of the car, which would have given it a kind of roofline rather closer to its main opposition, rather than what it looks like at the moment, which is what it is. It's a very big, luxurious GT car on the road, converted into what does look like literally a grand, large touring car. And that is going to produce some challenges with or without balance of performance. Is it right yet? Clearly it isn't, is the honest answer. What is the basis of that not being right? Well, I think that's the same kind of set of questions that were being asked until last weekend about the Aston Martin Vantage GTE, which didn't look even close to the pace until we got to Silverstone, and now seems rather closer to it. Maybe we're closer to the sweet spot in balance of performance for the new Aston, and maybe that's the process that needs to take place as we move to the flyaway section of the Super Season in WEC.
Stop adding things that are smart and better. Goodwin. I'm really getting sick and tired of you, man. All right, we're going to close here on some FUN fun. And, all right, and actually, I think I might have the best answer for this one, but we'll see, because you're going to lead off with the answers, hopefully. Corey Showmaker, pick one team where you have to swap the driver and chief engineer and or / crew chief and win a race. And why will you win? Who do you pull out of the car, put on the Pratt perch?
It's a really, really good question, isn't it?
Who do you take off the timing stand and or off of a pit lane in their chief mechanicking gear and stuff them into the car? Who wins and why?
I'm going to choose one. It's a person that no one will ever have heard of. It's a guy by the name of Steve Hagger, who is the
You're
lead.
making up people. Is that what you're resorting to?
Yes. I'm not going to kind of fill in the blanks because it's a family show. But guess what, Steve? The Dymo label on Steve Hagger's radio says. But it's Steve has been a key part of JMW Motorsports attack for as long as I can remember. Before that, did time with the likes of Gigawave and other teams. Lovely, lovely bloke. Has his own road-going original Audi Quattro, which is kept just beautifully. But he is just one of these guys who's got passion and competitiveness from every pore of his body. And I think he could step aboard that Ferrari and just drive it like the devil, but would drive it with that passion. And I think that's probably the same for a huge number of people up and down pit lane. I'm just trying to think of someone who's just utterly doggone ruthless. It's that kind of iron fist and a velvet glove. There's so many people in motorsport that, but for opportunity and budget, would be just as happy aboard the car as spannering it, as running strategy for it, as engineering it. There's so much talent out there if it wasn't just for the fact that they're not a millionaire.
Well, as we have admitted here, you and I are both multi-hundredaires, so those millionaires can suck it. I think I have the perfect answer here. I think the answer would be in IMSA, Corvette Racing, and the swap would be Tommy Milner and crew chief extraordinaire Dan Binks. Why? Well, Milner comes from a fairly illustrious racing family, a highly technically driven man. I am confident that if asked to engineer a Corvette, he could do so with great competence. Why Dan Binks? Former racer of cars exactly like this. A little bit of a forgotten footnote in Dan's history, but this is a guy who's raced in Trans Am, raced at the 24 Hours of Daytona in GT machinery. This is a guy with real driving talent. So I think Corvette, I don't know if he's ever listed as a reserve driver, and, he and I would both face the same issues of, if we could do a few stints and just wouldn't mind the steering wheel kind of rubbing into our bellies a little bit. We might be a little bit large for the cockpit, but good old Binksy is someone we could throw right in, and that guy would drop the hammer. So, and then fix any things that he might need to if he did use the chrome horn or get into it with some others. He's also bigger than every driver in any of the cars in IMSA, and so none of them would want to fight. If anything, if he took people out, they would get out and offer to fix his car. So we might have the right thing. We might have the right choice here. Or maybe not. Let's see. Where should we go? Shea Adam. And we're finally, I think, Graham, we're at a point where we're ready to, we're confident in saying Shea Adam, definitely not a Dutch, Saudi chocolatier or any of the other machinations we've come up with.
I thought Malaysian Parfumier. I'm completely wrong about.
I think we're confident in saying this is our pal Shea Adam, she of awesome pit lane reporting and TV work and all kinds of things. Shea says, what is your favorite helmet pattern / color scheme of any driver in the world?
That's a really good one. That is a really good one. There have been favourites down through the years. It's a bit different. It's Rob Bell. And I think with Rob, proud northeastern Englander from the fair city of Newcastle upon Tyne, and it's the bright yellow. I do like a bright helmet because you can see it even inside a GT car, exactly who it is. And there's something about Rob and his link to his home that I just find. I just like that. I think he's got the Tyne Bridges as a logo on the back of the helmet, which is the defining geographic factor for Newcastle, the 7 bridges across the Tyne. Rob Bell. Beyond that, the likes of, back in Formula One days, Nigel Mansell's helmet, Ayrton Senna's helmet, iconic designs. I do like, though, when race drivers stick with the same basic design. They can tinker with it, but stick with the same basic design. I don't like this kind of current vogue for let's have a commemorative helmet every 3 races. I find that a massive turn-off. I think this is what defines these guys. I think it is part of their image in the racing community and with the fan base. And I like a driver to stick with something through their entire career.
Yeah, drivers stick with things, so Graham likes it. And I might be partial to a few. He isn't my brother. He's never been my brother. Although he did bring me, not just a couple days ago, just to check in and say hi and see how things were doing. Scott Pruett. I always liked his helmet, original era.
Is he selling life insurance now?
He is actually selling farm insurance. So
is he?
Pretty awesome, pretty amazing. I liked his helmet. It's probably because it had Pruett on the side, and I'm that dumb and literal. Me, personally, I like that. Let's see. I wrote something dumb and stupid in a response to Shea that I was leaning toward the Stig's High Art concept helmet livery of a polar bear in a snowstorm, and that's just because it's a white cue ball. If I had to do which one? If I had Gilles Villeneuve's helmet livery, really, that one stuck out to me as all kinds of awesome.
Pink?
But no, he was one of my early driving heroes.
I think it's Jacques Villeneuve. Hurry.
Yeah, good old Jacques. After that, here's one, and just because it came to mind because he got married last weekend. Our pal Willie T. Ribbs.
Oh, wow.
And this is something that I appreciated because it's the antithesis of what might have been expected for a driver like Willie, chock full of bravado and self-confidence. He, not always, but definitely for many years, rocked a white and pink striped helmet. And I just thought it was exquisite. You would have expected it to be, machine gun bullets and explosion and a big slab of steak because he's a man. I appreciated the fact that Willie was the manliest of men, but was not bothered with having to try and show that through some sort of declarative helmet livery. It was pink and white, and I just thought it was beautiful. I've seen some paintings that my friend Alex Wakefield has done recently of Willie in the cockpit of one of, I think it was the All-American Racers Toyota Celicas, a.k.a. Celicas, depending on where you are in the world. and it just reminded me of how glorious it looked. So, A, happy to Willie for getting married. Woman has finally made an honest man out of him. And she is 6'3". Willie's maybe, I don't know, 5'8", 5'9". So that's just an awesome kind of visual of, again, He-Man tough guy and his wife who could just pick him up with one hand and say, shut up, and then just drop him into a chair where he would sit quietly. So I'll go with Willie T's pink and white helmet. That's pretty cool, but I do at some point in time, Graham, need to do a tribute livery helmet of my own of one of Scott Pruett's 1980s or very early 90s helmets, because it just looked purty to me.
Excellent. I think we're going to finish off with a question from sports car racing fan extraordinaire Alex Sinclair. It's another one from our new friends at the Reddit WEC group.
Thank you, Reddit.
Indeed, and thank you very much, guys. We'll be posting the call again next week. Alex asks, has superstar drivers like Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso entering the WEC made our job, harder or easier? Well, I can do no better than to refer you to another post on that Reddit stream, and it comes from someone who clearly has not been a WEC fan to this point. Delighted to say that that's made a difference. Before we get into what he wrote, I'll tell you about some of the experiences for good and for bad. Of course, what you get once you get an absolute superstar walking into the room is you do tend, in journalistic terms, to get, how can I put this, a rather large bus full of asshats turn up and ask the same question over and over and over again, and that gets terribly, terribly tedious. And by attachment, that then means that those gentlemen are rather less likely to engage with those of us who don't want to ask those same tedious questions. So that means that we're yet to get to the point of steady state where Fernando, and less to the point, Jenson, are ready, willing, able to engage in a way that's not totally managed. And I completely get that. That's not down to them. What it does bring, though, is a substantial fan base, and there's no doubt whatsoever about that. The line for autographs for the pit walk at Silverstone was astounding. It was of Fuji-esque proportions and then some, and that was excellent to see. Well-behaved, passionate motorsport fans. That's what they were. To give you an idea of just how passionate, when I left the circuit for the on this Saturday evening, there were still people at, this would have been gone 10:45 in the evening, waiting politely at the paddock gates for, I would presume, Fernando and or Jenson to arrive. And as I left the circuit, pitch darkness, came across on one of the access roads two young Japanese ladies, completely lost, who had been waiting for their opportunity and had actually decided it was time to go to their hotel, so made sure they got their way to where the buses could pick them up. Beyond that, let me just read you this from the Reddit group. The 6 hours of Silverstone was amazing. This is posted by you/vanishing yesterday. Firstly, occasionally watch this in Le Mans because, well, it's Le Mans. Never been to a WEC, never been a WEC fan per se. I am, however, a huge Alonso fanboy. It made sense. I went to the 6 hours of Silverstone. Paid £50 thinking I was going to watch some racing, and that was about it. In the 2 days I went, I got to meet Fernando Alonso at the back of the Toyota garage, paddock access, pit walk Saturday and Sunday, autograph session, met Pedro Lamy and Felix da Costa, he's Portuguese, free parking, the Le Mans simulator, Silverstone wing access and home straight view. You can look down onto the pit lane below. A ton of amazing racing from various stands. Free bus took us around the circuit. Those buses, by the way, are the traditional British buses and therefore double-decker. You can see over the barriers, and have Wi-Fi. You can watch the stream. Saw a few cars close up in Parc Fermé, did 3 laps of Silverstone on the simulator. The list goes on. Amazing weekend, 100% recommend, great fan access and top-notch organisation. He says that was 50 quid. I think it was 45 on the gate for a single day pass. Paddock access, he also says, for Formula One is around £4,000. That, ladies and gentlemen, despite all the cynicism, is what having Fernando Alonso and Jenson Button in our midst has delivered. It's delivered a new fan base to sports car racing. More power to them. Sermon over.
Yeah, that's not a sermon. That is just preaching the gospel. And I would say that the number one thing that has kept sports car racing in the shadow of other forms of racing for not all of its history, but large portions of its existence, has been the lack of big drawing power among drivers. Obviously, there have been eras where the cars were the stars. That was one of the ALMS series, big promotional lines. I grew up in the 70s, particularly the 80s, where IMSA and its GTP cars absolutely rivaled IndyCar, which was then the most popular, well ahead of NASCAR. IMSA was right up there, vying for most beloved North American road racing series. And that was at a time where, there were some stars, but for the most part it was the amazing cars to come out and see. We haven't always had the big names to help support that. I think of when the Earnhardts Jr. and Sr. turned up as part of the Corvette team. That is something that just sent coverage just into the stratosphere, and it was strictly because of them. The cars were just as awesome the year before they showed up and the year after, but that huge spike in traffic and interest came from names. And this is something that I'm hoping, Graham, that the sport we love and you all love that are joining in here, we're hoping that it reaches the wider masses. We hope that more folks tuning in leads to obviously improved ratings, improved sponsor valuations so that teams can ask for and receive more money, that corporate America, corporate EU, corporate wherever, that has not always bought in heavily with big brand name sponsorships in sports cars, right? It's often been manufacturers, funded gentlemen, gentlewomen taking part. It's maybe pie-in-the-sky dreams, but I am hoping that an Alonso, that a Button, if we can keep them around for a couple of years, that in theory, that sustained participation could be the thing that connects more the corporate world, more eyeballs. Everything gets better. So, kind of silly to think how we're talking about just a couple of drivers there.
Oh, yeah.
And in IMSA, we can talk about, I don't know if we've seen it, so maybe it hasn't worked. I'd hoped it would, but the addition of three-time 8,500 winner Helio Castroneves, two-time 500 winner Juan Montoya, and also of Formula One and other fame. Again, we'll have to do a proper accounting at the end of the year to see if attendance was up or whatever was up. But in theory, they could or should grow the profile of IMSA in North America, so we'd be fortunate. I guess what it tells me is we need to get Dale Earnhardt Jr. out of retirement and get him back in to a sports car or something here in North America, and that would in theory help. But yeah, whomever it is, if there's a driver you love that is really, really popular and isn't in sports cars, right now we are advocating you to blow up their social media feeds and tell them, go play in the WEC, play in IMSA, play in something, and make our little world of sports cars more popular because it helps everyone. All right, is that the end of this episode?
That'll do for me. All I'd say, just as a final comment, is when you see comments like that from your mates that you exchange messages with on social media, make sure your other mates see it. Make sure their mates see it. Be nice, because it's all a bit too tribal at times, isn't it? Just the fact that they like Formula One and you don't, and I can be just as guilty of this as most, and more guilty than most, it's got to be said. Welcome them with open arms. If they tell you they're going to come to a sports car race to see Fernando, arrange to meet up. Show them what they can get for their money, because they will be amazed, believe me.
Graham Goodwin, you are a national treasure. I'm adopting you. You're now an American. So I'm not sure how that's going to work from a tax standpoint. But I'll make up a visa. I'll write one out by hand, passport, whatever you need. All kidding aside, of the many reasons I love what we have here with our, good Lord, we're into almost a 3-hour episode. This is a long one, but again, we got 80 plus questions, so it definitely warranted it. But I enjoy doing this, not only because it's fun, not only because we get to talk in a more informal manner about the sport we love, and not only because we get great questions from folks on Facebook, Twitter, and now Reddit, but you bring a lot of the fun to this as well and make it worthwhile. So hugs, kisses, and smooches from across the pond.
Oh, shucks. Oh, shucks.
Huh?
Look forward to next week. Look forward to next week and the fun and games that comes with another 7 days and a week in sports cars.
All right. Well, thank you to not only Graham and the dailysportscar.com team and all you do and we do as well to support racer.com, but thank you to our friends at Cooper Tires and PNC Bank, and to you for tuning into our Week in Sports Cars episode. And if you're still here by the end, I'm telling you, you are all kinds of crazy, but it fits right in.